on in continuation of this observation of the World Elderly Abuse Awareness Day. And we have as a center, BDU Heritage Center for Gerontology, the Department of Social Work is happy to have an international webinar on elderly abuse trends, challenges, and way forward. In fact, I'm very happy to have in our midst the senior faculty in the field of gerontology. Therapy from the University of Malaysia, and Dr. Mala Kapoor, Shankar Das, an Asian representative of the International Network for Prevention of Elderly Abuse, New Delhi, India. And we are also happy to have Femida Shamem, CEO of Durban, who is from South Africa, and Professor D.V. Shekhar, Professor, Department of Population Policies and Programs, Mumbai, India, and Ajay Bailey, Professor Chair, School of Urban Transition, International Development Studies, Faculty of Geosciences, Netherlands, and the last speaker, but not the least, our good friend, Mr. Teddy Andrews, an assistant professor from social work program of Parnas School of Public Health, Manipal, and the coordinator of the center, my good teacher and well-wisher of the department, Dr. P. Ilango sir, who is very kind enough to have organized this webinar. In spite of all these difficulties, able to bring a lot of people. I welcome sir, and also welcome my own colleagues in the department, Dr. Jerida Nyanojo Eljo, Dr. Nirmala, and Dr. Rajavel, who is also the Deputy Coordinator of the Center, BDU Heritage Center for Gerontology. And most important person, I would say that the technical people who have been right from, of course, I want to inform the August the participants that this is the 7th webinar series just we are having through our department. We have been continuously having a webinar on the different fields, on the mental health, on the research methodology, even right now we are having a field on gerontology, and we have been planning on emotional intelligence. So many webinars have been planned by the Department of Social Work, and this is the 7th webinar in the series. And I would welcome and thank the team member, the technical team members, Dr. K. Suresh Kumar, Dr. R. Karthikeyan, Dr. Selvamani, Mr. Milton, the PhD scholar, and Pugal Jodi, so who have been very tremendously helping us for the for this success of this webinar. That's what we are able to reach almost 52,000 viewers in the YouTube channel, and just in the our YouTube channel is just in the very baby stage, infant stage, I would say, just not even a month. And we are happy to share that we have around 2,500 subscribers to the for this webinar, for almost for this YouTube, sorry, not only for the webinar, for the YouTube. And happy to share with you that almost 1,203 participants have registered within this short duration. So that's a very good sign for the center and as well as for the department also. And happy to share that participants from 6 countries have joined, namely Zambia, Dubai, Germany, Malaysia, South Africa, and Singapore, and almost 27 representations of the participant from 27 states of our country has joined this particular webinar. So that's a good sign for the center and the department, because it is not because of the Department of Social Work, and it is also because of the eminent speakers like Dr. Jamuna, Nathan, Mala Kapoor, and because a very senior and Diane in the field of gerontology. So those people have joined. So that's what we are able to bring a good number of participants for the department. I hope that we will have a very fruitful sessions for this forenoon of our program, and this is only from 10:30 to 1, and I hope that you will be having a wonderful learning experience. With these few words, I welcome each one of you for this webinar, and I hand over the session to Professor Ilango for his felicitation address. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mangaleshwaran. Good morning, everyone. Respected Chief Guest and Keynote Speaker, Professor Jamuna, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sri Padmavati Mahila Vishwavidyalaya, my dear friend, philosopher and guide in the field of aging, Dr. K.R. Gangadharan, Chairman of the Heritage Foundation, and respected resource persons of this webinar, Professor Mala Kapoor Shankardas and Dr. Nathan Vaidilingam, Mr. Teddy Andrews, and other speakers, Professor P.V. Shekhar, and all the participants, and my dear colleagues in the Department of Social Work. It gives me immense joy to join all of you on this occasion and say a few words. This webinar is conducted by the BDU Heritage Center for Gerontology. As Dr. Mangaleshwaran pointed out, this center is, it just recently established in our department with the tremendous support of Dr. Gangadharan, and it's in collaboration with the Heritage Foundation. Bharathidasan University has an MOU with the Heritage Foundation for the establishment of this center and for all the aging related activities which we will be undertaking in the due course of time. And as of now,
Hello.
Can you hear me, Mangal?
Yes, sir. Please proceed, sir.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So this center was established and launched officially by our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor P. Manish Shankar, recently, and our registrar, Professor Gopinath, has always been very supportive. I would like to, station Professor P. Manish Shankar, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, and Professor Gopinath, the Registrar of the University, for their tremendous support. And I wish to thank my colleagues in the department, Dr. Mangaleshwaran, the head of the department, and my other colleagues, Dr. Nirmala, Dr. Jerida, Dr. Rajavel, for extending their support for all the activities of this center. Even before the launch of this center, for the last 2 years, we have been having a series of geriatric care related programs in our university with the support of Heritage Foundation. And so after working together for nearly 2.5 years, Bharathidasan University Department of Social Work and Heritage Foundation have come together by way of this MOU for the establishment of this center. So the vision of the center is to train a good cadre of professionals for senior citizens care management. We would like to train people for various functions related to senior citizens care. So it's not just running old age homes, or not just conducting some specific activity alone, and it's not just focusing on medical aspects or other aspects. We would like to have a very comprehensive approach to the area of gerontology by including all the dimensions. And very soon I'm happy to share with you the very happy news, very glad news, that our university and Heritage Foundation, through this center, would be launching an online course, a diploma program, very shortly. It's the efforts are on, and almost the groundwork is being done now. It's being completed now, and we hope to be able to launch this first venture of this diploma program very shortly. And at this point of time, I'm thankful to the stalwarts in the field of aging, Professor Jamuna and Professor Mala Kapoor Shankardas and Professor Nathan and Professor P.V. Shekhar, and our young and budding gerontologist who is doing a lot of work in this area, Teddy Andrews, for joining us in this webinar as resource persons. So I express my very deep sense of gratitude to all of you, particularly to Professor Jamuna for sparing her valuable time in the midst of all the other commitments at the university. And it is a great pleasure, ma'am, that you are able to be with us. Thank you so much, Professor Jamuna. And I also thank Dr. Mala Kapoor Shankardas and Dr. Nathan and Dr. Teddy and Dr. P.V. Shekhar. I thank you all, and I hope this webinar is going to be a wonderful experience for all of us. With these words, I conclude my remarks. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mangal.
Yes, sir. Now, may I request Dr. K.R. Gangadharan to moderate the session and giving his opening remarks, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mangaleshwaran and Dr. Vilangu and the team in Bharati Dasan University to have organized a third webinar now that we are having. And this is a very important webinar because we are also commemorating the day that we are talking about preventing abuse of the elderly. And so I'd like to welcome particularly Dr. Jamuna, whom I've been very closely working for almost 30 years now. I remember to have met her perhaps for the first time in 97 or 96 when we had the conference in Hyderabad. And I remember Dr. Mala Kapoor also came for one of our meetings along with one of the national policy meetings that we originally scheduled. And I'm delighted to have with us three important people that were very nice to accept, particularly, I'm talking about people from outside the country. One is Dr. Ajay from Netherlands. So he's from India, but he works in Netherlands. I met him on a number of occasions for a period of time. I'd like to welcome him on that. And then we have Dr. Nathan. Dr. Nathan is another person whom I've known for almost 25 plus years of time. And I met him in several programs all over the world. Nice to have him, and very nice of him to accommodate his timing on a working day, particularly on a Monday, where his timings are very different from India. And third person I really asked in the last minute, which is not fair, but I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude to Femida, Dr. Femida Shaman from Tufta, Durban. I just spoke 3 days ago, and I was introduced to her by Maggie from Cape Town. Nice to have you with us, and I'm sure these three international experiences give us a lot of learning. And I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of Mala. Dr. Mala Kapoor has been very important because she's been working in Delhi for a very long time in the academic field, and but an important role that she performs also as an Asia representative for International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse. And I was hopefully, by the time we conclude, perhaps in all probability, Susan Summers, the president from New York, might send us a message. She said she will try to join us for a few minutes if time permits, but I'm not sure whether she's going to be able to do it. Then we have Dr. T.V. Shekhar, who has done a lot of work on elder abuse particularly through building knowledge base in aging population in India, BKPA through NRPA. I've also known him through that contact, and he has been known to me for a long time. Nice to have him too. And Mr. Teddy Andrews, who's now pursuing his PhD, is almost in the final stage of getting his PhD, submitting his papers on, particularly on elder abuse in intergenerational perspective. So with this, what I intend doing is to have three of you speak and then have some question answers. Then again, another three speakers to speak. Then we have question answers so that we have some exchange of thoughts. And yes, this is really a pleasure to have Dr. Jamuna, who's now occupying a very important role as a Vice Chancellor of the University in Tirupati. And very nice to have you, I know this is a very pet subject for her, and I'm sure she's going to delight all of us with her keynote address. Now it's over to Dr. Jamuna. Thank you, Dr. Jamuna.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yes.
Good morning to everyone once again. I'm really happy to associate myself with this event with all my colleagues who worked in the gerontology field for more than 2 decades. So before I start the lecture, I just want to congratulate Professor Ilango for initiating this gerontology program in the university campus in association with Heritage Foundation. And it's a good beginning in the Indian gerontology, I can say. So by being the reviewer of the field for more than 5 times, so we've been writing this sort of initiatives between academics and the NGOs or any agencies or service providers, So now I am very happy to see this initiative taking place in the university called Bharathidasan University. So I wish you all the best in your programs. Am I audible? Hello?
You're audible.
Yeah? Yes, ma'am. You are audible. Perfect, ma'am. Perfect.
Yeah. See, today the organizers asked me to speak on the theme called elder abuse, since it happens to be the observance of Elder Abuse Day, World Elder Abuse Day. Okay, the topic which I am going to speak is known to everyone there, especially the speakers from various backgrounds. So I will try to share some of my thoughts based on the research reports and the surveys on elder abuse, especially in India. So first, in the first instance, let me share something about the highlights of aging in India. As you all know, one of the stunning achievements in the 21st century is population aging. It is characterized by increasing numbers of 60 plus in the total population, higher proportion of females, growth in the age segment of 80 plus years, tremendous increase of lifespan, especially at 60 years and 70 years. and we all know about half of India's elderly are poor. More than half have no independent income, and old age pension doesn't reach all the needy elderly population. 1/3 of our population lives in urban, and 2/3 of rural are not, literate. Sorry, 1/3 of urban and 2/3 of rural are not literate, and majority are living in rural areas. And if you talk about the living arrangements, the story says 56% of elderly are staying with their spouses, 32% with their adult children, and 6% stay alone. In terms of health status, a third elderly suffer from arthritis, about a half have vision problems, and a fifth have hearing defects. It's all based on NSS for 2016 report. So apart from this population aging, certain socio-technological transformations in the modern Indian society, like growing industrialization, urbanization, modernization, and migration, it resulted in uh, in it resulted in a great difficulty, especially in the elder care scenario in India. It is to say that 30% of elderly either no family or cannot live with the family. So it's all, I mean, what I would like to summarize on the basis of this is the aging in India, for sure, it's a challenge not only to the growing individual, but also to to their families and to the society at large. I just want to share something, since we are going to talk on elder abuse, I want to, share something about the elder care and how it is an issue in the Indian context for our international, participants. Especially because of these, socio-technological changes, we know pretty well that there's a dwindling of joint family system. Who was the care provider of elder care. And there is an increase in the dual career families. And because of that, there is a crunch of time, space, and money towards elder care. And also, there is a pretty clear evidence to show that there is a shift in the filial piety and value orientations. So that is value orientations, especially change from collectivistic, values to independent and individual values. And also another, marker is change in the traditional roles of women. So once upon a time, elderly, once upon a time, the primary caregiver in the house is the woman. Now she is away at work, and she has lot of multiple demands, which is resulting in stress and the other consequences. And yet another change in the recent, living arrangement scenario in India is people living alone is becoming a norm. That is because of this, there is a increasing, crime and also increasing incidents of elder abuse, report of elder abuse. And before we, go into the topic, I just want to say, see, is these years, that is an extension of longevity, more, it's only characterized as more empty nest years, degeneration and dependency, which is making elder care an issue at the family level. So as a result, you all agree with me, a lot of formal care homes are emerging as an alternative living arrangement, especially for low and middle income groups. Though various categories of, let me move on to the elder abuse topic. See, before I go to this, I just want to say, in India, aging is we always say, social psychologists, we always say that social labeling is yet another, challenge, and it's an important marker of age discrimination. See, the type of disengagement. Who is disengaging who? Whom? This is very, very important. This is, labeling, negative labeling of elderly is yet another important change in the Indian context. See, when we go to the, definitions of elder abuse, when you go to the, definitions of elder abuse, So, I mean, I tried to scan through the literature. There are various categories of, defining abuse and mistreatment and various headings, but ultimately what constitutes abuse within the context of one's culture is relevant. Example, respect and reverence in addressing is the norm of our society. Calling, by name is the norm of, in the West, especially in the US. And, personal privacy is the right, or, is the desire of the institutionalized elderly in the West, whereas it is not so in this. So how, the abusive and non-abusive situation depends on the culture. And when you scan this abuse, the term abuse, so there are various types ranging from physical, verbal, psychological, or emotional, sexual, and financial neglect and abandonment. Depending on the situational factors, abuse or mistreatment is categorized as domestic mistreatment at their home setting, either in a formal care home, like old age home or geriatric nursing home, and self-respect. Elder care, is yet another thing which we need to discuss when we talk about elder abuse. As you all know, elder care and elder abuse are both are intertwined. Okay, so here, elder care, to define elder care, it is a delicate delicate humane dyadic activity. Any deliberate physical, psychological harm or economic exploitation is an act of elder abuse. And based on the, summarization, I could able to say it's a deliberate, especially in the context of elder care, any deliberate physical, psychological harm or economic exploitation is an act of elder abuse. Any omission or commission related behavior in the interactional context of elder care. So predisposing, precipitating factors in the causation of abuse are crucial in understanding the abuse in a care context. The predisposing factors could be financial dependency, disability or disability related dependency, gender, marital status, age, personality, values, traditions, cultural factors and social legal deterrents influence the mindset of the perpetrator. Well, let me move on to the researchers, carried out on elder abuse. See, when you see the word abuse, it's clearly, says that, the early decades were mostly on child abuse. Later on, it has been shifted to spousal abuse. Now, the more focus is on elder abuse. And, the researchers in India, especially to speak about, the elder abuse and neglect cases vary across the socio-economic status and gender of the victims. It's clearly reported that likelihood of mistreatment decreased with affluence, occupation, wealth, and good health. Sorry, something is missing in this, slides. By mistake, he uploaded this one. See, actually, when I was working in the Center for Research and Aging, Sri Venkateswara University, we had a project funded by ICSSR and also ICMR, wherein, we evolved a model of, anatomy of elder abuse in the Indian context, where we could, based on the inputs from the field and the reports, we could able to evolve a model that reflects the clear precipitating factors, and then predisposing, precipitating factors which influence the mindset of the perpetrator and, makes him or her to drive into action, and which will turn into, abusive practices. I mean, usually with advancing age, you know, decline in health and frailty, consequent dependency increases the vulnerability to abuse. Analysis of profiles of abusers and victims suggests that certain idiosyncratic personality characteristics in specific, for example, caregiver or care receiver, who has aggression, dominance, who has exploitative nature, rigidity, and sensitivity were found to be the explanatory factors in elder abuse. As we noticed in the previous slides, that aging population in India is heterogeneous, and so the life experiences and characteristics differ according to the socioeconomic and cultural context of elderly. So also the nature of elder abuse. And then let me say, now in Indian funding agents, R&D agencies, one of the thrust areas of research in gerontology is elder abuse. Yeah, this was the model I was referring to, that is predisposing, precipitating factors, and some of the factors which maintain these, in the elder care context and, influence the mindset of perpetrator, and it results in abuse activity in the, care setting. Well, as I was mentioning, elder care and abuse are intertwined. When we talk about abuse, naturally it should be connected to the elder care in the beginning, and in specific. Elder care, either in the family setting or in the formal setting, it's a delicate, humane, direct activity where, I was telling, which needs to be, very, very important in considering in any of the measures we are going to plan for elderly to reduce the abuse. In the contemporary changing society, if you take, still the reports, the researchers says that, the most cases, the abuse cases, it is still latent and invisible, not noticed, not acknowledged openly, unattended and underreported. And then the factors that generate during the interaction, as I was telling, in caregiving should be modulated whenever we plan interventions, to handle elder abuse. So, especially in the elder care, the multiple demands and overload on the caregiver resulting in stress, which often push the caregiver to a state of physical and mental exhaustion. There are no supportive programs for the caregiver. So naturally, this scenario is very, very common in many families. Under those, mental exhaustion, physical and mental exhaustion, such outbreaks are not recognized in caregivers, unfortunately, in a society like India, due to certain cultural sanctions and gender role expectations. And inevitably, such stressful conditions may force them to engage in potentially harmful behaviors. This was the observation, noticed in many of the elder care stress and abuse studies. Caregivers with a history, especially caregivers with a history of mental health issues like depression and irritability, as I was mentioning, general anxiety syndrome, who experience high levels of anger and resentment, exhibit harmful behaviors. The end result is experience of neglect, abandonment, or abuse in the hands of the stressed caregiver. Despite, I just want to highlight, in spite of this, still family is the major care provider in India. Well, I just want to share in specific some certain popular surveys and make very important research contributions made in Indian context. So before I go into the details of the research reports or surveys, I just want to say abuse, when you examine the abuse conditions, abuse situations and towards elderly, it shows it happens in the family context. It's very surprising. In some studies, it is by women. That too often daughters as frequent perpetrators and mothers as the victims. So the reasons are pretty, clear in these cases. That is conflicting relationship between daughter and mother, aggression, aggressive tendency, hostility behavior, and mistrust. These kind of, temperamental characteristics trigger the abuse in the setting, in the family setting. And I just want to highlight some of the important points which we need to think about it, about elder abuse based on the popular survey made by Best Trust of India in 2012. According to this PTI report, 31% of elderly in 60 years and above are subjected to abuse, so especially in the form of disrespect, neglect, verbal abuse by the family. And mostly the primary abuser is son, about 56%, followed by 23% of daughters-in-law, and it is very, very frequent. I mean, if you ask me how frequent it is, most frequently son and the daughter-in-law were the primary abusers in the family context. And in the sample, 55% didn't report any abuse. I mean, they were silent because of social desirability. And 20% of the abused elderly were graduates, 19% had primary education, and only 16% had no education. I think this should provide us a sort of, clue, while we, plan the interventions. Well, yet another important study carried out by HelpAge India across 20 cities by including 5,600 respondents, which is still in 2014, which is still, very good, stands very good. And even I checked with the recent ICSSR project reports on elder abuse. So, more or less the same figures are reflecting in those reports. That's why I thought I can, share the HelpAge India's project. See, according to this HelpAge India's report, 74% of the abused are staying with their families, and 69% were the owners of the house in which they are living. I'm sorry, there are some typographical errors. And when we examine across the cities, it happened, 77%. It happened almost 77% in Bhopal, 60% in 55% in Guwahati, 52% in Uttar Pradesh, around 43 in Gujarat, 43 in Andhra Pradesh, 37% in Karnataka, and around 33.5% in Jammu and Kashmir, and almost 33% in Chandigarh. And when you look at the sample, 51% of the sample were women, and 59% were in 60 to 69 age group, 28% in 70 to 79, and 8% in 80 years. So, and also the conclusion of this report is, which is very interesting. The situation is similar in almost all the socioeconomic categories. So it reflects our culture, it reflects our tradition, reflects our reverence towards our elderly. Then let me move on to what will be the future. See, let me be positive about the future. In the absence of strategic measures to meet the challenges, the prolonged years of life will be characterized by disability, dependency, extension of years have no meaning for senior citizens. So, especially the academia and the non-governmental organizations, efforts are very much needed to make the extended years of life with, respect, dignity, worth, without victimization, mistreatment, and abuse at the familial and societal levels. There is a need to sensitize the older adults. That's very, very important, and their family members, and also, the public, about causes and consequences of elder abuse. I can say it is not still serious. We have been talking about sensitization of older adults, but still it is restricted to a packet of, academicians, or, students, or, NGOs. It's not actually taking place as it should be. So therefore, my desire or my appeal to all the gerontologists is that it should be vigorous. I know that there is a forum run by, Dr. Malaka, Shankar Kapoor Das, and also international forum. But, still in a country like India, it needs to be much more vigorous to address this particular elder abuse. And it's essential to provide more scientific and systematic training to equip the personnel, especially working with the elderly, to tackle the more complex situation during interventions. See, this is important because while I was scanning through the researches, I came to know that in the Western context, most of the abuse is taking place in the care homes. And they created a lot of, support systems to address this issue, but still, it's prevailing. So in India, the scenario is we are, encouraging, or we are going for more elder formal care homes. So therefore, it should be, addressed in the beginning of this, formal care homes models, in adapting the formal care homes in the place of, family. The need for geriatric counseling centers, of course, and family counseling centers, along with the helplines, are to be started. So, for example, in Tirupati, we've been trying to, establish this, but still the priority is to the women, to the girls, and the last priority is for seniors. So, in handling victims of abuse, this is very, very important. Geriatric counseling centers, family counseling centers are very important. Helplines, they say that police department, they are, running the helplines. But, in the academic institutions, geriatric counseling centers, establishment of geriatric counseling centers are very, 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 very important. Also, adequate resources should be allocated for intervention programs for elderly by the government and other philanthropic agencies. See, when you talk about the exclusive funding for this elder abuse, not much. It's part of other funding. So therefore, my appeal is that it should be increased, and it's specifically focused on this elder abuse victims. And then government and research agencies should ensure funding and technical assistance for NGOs and community-based organizations to work in the area of elder abuse. Of course, the initiatives of the future must be individual, must be based on individual, must be based on family, must be based on society at large. So therefore, encouraging family care with incentives. As I was mentioning, caregiving stress is very, very common in many long-term care elderly setting. So therefore, family care should be rewarded with incentives, and then it should be recognized as a special concern group which needs a comprehensive care system. And when you look at the reports or research outcomes, it's pretty clear that older women are the, targets of abuse. So therefore, they require special attention because they are subjected to triple jeopardy for being old, for being poor, and for being a widow. And as I was mentioning, the consideration at societal level, strengthening of social structures to provide care. Especially, I've been talking about the elder care because it's, both are interrelated. So therefore, encouragement of home-based services, age-integrated senior residential living, age-integrated adult daycare services. I mean, some of these Western models, I think, it worked very good because when I worked on models of elder care in USA, Canada, and UK, I mean, I strongly felt this kind of home-based services, age-integrated senior residential living, age-integrated adult daycare, respite home care services for caregivers are very, very important for sharing of elder care, especially between NGOs, agent service providers, and the state. And I mean, still, if we can, if you see the details, we need some more. That is, suspected victims needs a comprehensive. So we've been talking that, I mean, there is a prevalence of elder abuse. The incidence is this much. Where is the comprehensive plan for action? There is no comprehensive plan. So therefore, there should be a comprehensive geriatric assessment which needs to be based on multidisciplinary team approach. Therefore, it's also, I mean, I think the organizers should note this and then, plan in the BDS Heritage uh, Gerontology Center. Then reliable data, virtually speaking, actually speaking, there is no reliable database on elder abuse. So it's very important that government should come forward and should encourage the national level database about the prevalence and incidence of elder abuse. And also, I mean, adult protective services, especially in the care homes and in the family. I mean, it should come out in the form of a legislation. I'm not talking about the legislation of Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act 2007, but specifically it should be related to elder abuse. So in the beginning, as I was showing this model of anatomy of elder abuse in Indian context, so we have to take into consideration the precipitating and predisposing factors while planning any sort of interventions, either social work or sociology or psychology or any kind of other agency interventions. This should be taken into account. So health insurance, I need not talk about this, I mean how it is related to the elder abuse center. So I have a great respect for this act, but the efficacy, the implementation, the what's happening. So and then I just want to, before I complete this, I just want to show some of the pictures which we have secured while we were interviewing the elderly in the old age homes. This is the life in old age home. See, I told you, in the beginning, so I shared that, what is abuse? It's again, culturally, it should be defined culturally. See, this is a sort of, neglect or abuse in the Western context, but it is the norm in our Indian. See, look at this. This kind of crowd, where there is no privacy. So it is abuse, mistreatment, or, kind of neglect in terms of certain lenses, but, it is the norm in the Indian context. Look at the family caregiving. See, can we say these elderly are abandoned in their houses? Yes, sure. When you fit this into the elder abuse situation, they are once they become disabled, once they become bedridden, that means they are restricted to a corner in the house where the question is the hygiene, the other conditions, the comfort. Look at this. This is the scenario. And then, this is the typical care scenario in, lower and middle income, even in villages, middle income families. This is the place meant for older people who are disabled, who are, having long-term sickness. I thank you very much, the organizers, for giving me this opportunity. So, before I conclude, I strongly appeal to the NGOs and the academia, especially in the universities, those who are working in the universities. So they should set up elder abuse, centers, elder abuse centers, so that they can serve the needy elderly in a more, in a more befitting way. Thank you, Dr. Gangadharan, Dr. Ilango, and the organizing committee of this webinar for making me part of this event and to speak some of the, researchers related to elder abuse in the Indian context. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Yamuna. I think it was absolutely thought-provoking, and I think you cited a lot of studies. I think elder abuse remains a big menace in this country, and we are holding this in Tamil Nadu, which is also supposed to be one of the highest incidents of abuse has been taking place. And there have been a lot of case studies that have been brought out in the newspapers. I think you spoke at the right forum, particularly in Tamil Nadu. And thanks a lot for your thought process. I think you've given us a lot of ideas. The next 2 hours of time, I'm sure other speakers would add on to what we should be doing. I think your thought, particularly about having centers, elder abuse centers in the universities, colleges, as a part of the council, even if it is taking place an hour or two in a week, could probably make a lot of difference. I think that's a wonderful
services. Adult support services.
That's a wonderful takeaway, one particular point among others. Now I invite Dr. Nathan Vaidilingam. And Dr. Nathan has been a very, very, serious, very senior person, was spearheaded a lot of programs on healthy aging. I think he has been very actively involved in healthy aging, conducted a lot of international conferences. I'm sure he has a lot to share with us, and he is the Dean and School of Occupational Therapy in Perdana University in Malaysia. I have heard him in several forums around the world. I thought he would be another person to give us a lot of thought process. Yes, Dr. Nathan, you have another 15 minutes to carry on. Thanks once again for being very nice despite hectic time schedule differences and being with us. Carry on. Over to you, Dr. Nathan.
Thanks very much, Dr. Ganga and Prof. Ilango. Good afternoon to everybody. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Kuala Lumpur, and I think it's morning there in Malaysia at this moment. So, and I just had my lunch. So I guess you guys would have just had your breakfast, Could I share those slides with you all?
Yes, sir.
They would do. Just give them a, since you are told them straight away, they will open.
Right.
We have been doing it continuously. We have been having this continuously, the third seminar. We are all ready to operate it well for you.
Yes.
Great, thanks. Just introduce myself. I've been 47 years in the field of occupational therapy. I'm an honorary fellow of the World Federation of Occupational Therapists. Set up the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society, which is about 17 years old, and we basically advocate in terms of healthy aging, which is basically to healthcare professionals as well as to the public, and that's basically what the whole group of us are passionate about it. I'm just looking at, I can't, John, have you managed to put it up for me?
Yeah, it's already, it's been put up, sir.
I can't.
You're all able to see it.
I can't view. No, I can't able to see it.
Pin John Milton, sir. John Milton. You can just pin the John Milton. You can able to hear.
Right. Anyway, John, maybe I'm just trying to.
Sir, you will find the name John Milton. Just try to pin. Just try to pin that.
Don't worry, relax, you will get it.
John, it's okay. What I will do is I will just start off. I guess the thing I like to talk about is John. The first slide, if you can just control my slides for me, that would be grateful because I can't see it. Anyway, the first thing that I like to highlight is this is totally a financial abuse. It's one big area which has been unspoken about, partly because of a lot of cultural reasons. You find that nobody wants to talk about it. The family just sorts of, the victim is aware, but they don't seem to be given the opportunity to highlight the issues and problems that they face. And it's a common thing that has been happening, you know. If you look at it, the next slide, John, please, is elder abuse and neglect. It happens mainly, I don't know whether many of us are aware, but it actually happens in your own home ground. You know, it is not, we always feel it's got to do with the nursing homes or something of the sort. No, it is actually in your own home ground that it happens. And it's actually among family members itself. And we know this is a common thing that takes place with all of us, you know. Now, the important factor to realize is, you know, I think Vice Chancellor, Madam Vice Chancellor has given a very good overview of everything that happens in India and everything. But very often when people look at what elder abuse, they think it is got to do with physical abuse. But very often we know it's not so much of the physical aspects, it is a financial aspects. And if you notice, it's the fastest growing problem among the aging population now. And it's just sort of culturally, nobody talks about it. That's why I call it the unspoken problem completely. Now, United Nations has highlighted the need for, because, you know, we all seem to be living longer. In Malaysia, the lifespan is 76, 78, 76 for women, and 78 for women, and men is 76. And obviously, it's the fastest growing problem and trend in this country now. We have got a constitution which says that all persons are equal before the law and even to the equal protection of the law. We do not have a particular law for the elderly. And I'm in a way glad this thing has come out, because I actually contacted the Faculty of Law, the Ministry of, in University of Malaya, and they've just come out with the whole looking to get it passed in Parliament. So there's be a special law just for the elderly, and it's nice to know on this day that is being happening. Now, the other important factor is we always refer to the abuse is more common among the women folks, and as Madam Vice Chancellor has mentioned just now, very common issue, very common problem among the women folks. And that's why in some ways we refer to it as it is a granny bashing in the term of very often used. And it's just totally a silent cry. Nobody talks about it, as I said. And it's a very little informative aspects available even locally. Nobody wants to report it, because you don't want to report this because you're going to report to the police about your own son or daughter. So people tend to avoid this issues and problems that are being highlighted. So reporting becomes a big issue, and you find that the screening processes in a clinical setting in hospitals and everything are the doctors really geared towards proper screening, looking out for the physical marks if it's ever it is. And we have cases where people talk to you about, please do not tell my son or my daughter that I'm talking to you about this, because I don't want them to know that I'm talking to somebody about the financial issues that are happening in my. So financial abuse has become a big thing, and I'm sure all of us are aware. The WHO is now aware that this is one of the biggest problems that are taking place. Okay. Now, is there a national center on elder abuse in Malaysia? No, we do not have a national center for elder abuse, but most NGOs and most universities and hospitals are becoming aware. The ministry, our aging population is actually under the Ministry of Family and Community Development, and they actually control the aspects of looking after the elderly besides Ministry of Health. And they have now gradually looking at bringing this up, because we're looking at 9% of our population above 60. You use 60 as a cutoff point for aging here. I know in WHO it's 65, in Malaysia it's 60. And in 2030, we're going to be 15% of our population. And if that happens, then you know that we are already an aged nation itself. So is there a need for a mandatory law? Yes, I think there is a need for a mandatory law. And many of the healthcare professionals, and I'm sure when the geriatricians and gerontologists realize there's a big need for this. And it's basically, end of the day, we need to advocate this in certain countries. And very often it is looked as if it is a Western issue. It's not. It is also an Eastern problem very much, and a lot of things are caught up here as well. But what should the Act include? The Act should include, whether you're taking money under any form of false pretenses, which is very common because you find that they take the debit card from the older person and withdraw money because so-and-so has got dementia, they're not aware, and those sort of issues. So there are a lot of underlying hidden issues, use of forged documents. We have cases where children ask for the grant of the house and they go and get a loan for starting off businesses. And because of financial constraints, they do not pay the bank, and the bank comes to take over the house. And the old couple are not totally aware of because all they did was trying to help their children for a betterment of their lives. And the children have taken an advantage of this, and that's an abuse completely, and we all know that. So withholding information of elder persons' resources, not telling them that they have how much of money they've got left in the bank or what is their property standing, and all this becomes a benefit to another person. Is very often a known person, is very often the family member. So it is important that we advocate, we, the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society, has been advocating to the older generation to write a will, but you need that in order to protect your loved ones, because if you don't, you will find that this is going to be a problem, and then sometimes you need a power of attorney, and there's not much a difference between British law and Malaysian law, because we follow the same sort of thing. So I think that's so very important to realize and consider in terms of encouraging the generations to look at writing a will, and to have a power of attorney as well. Now, the elder financial abuse of recent, very often, the next slide, please. It is very often you find that when pension is paid, the amount is received, you find they hardly meet the needs of the retiree very often. The cost of living has gone up, and you're looking at the cost of living in cities like Kuala Lumpur. It's totally not cheap. Even with this COVID-19 period, you find that there were a lot of financial implications of the older generation living alone, and they couldn't go out, and and that's because of the MCO. I know this is being. I was watching the BBC news this morning, and COVID-19 obviously is a big problem in India itself, as it's so fast growing. We are slowly coming out of it, and we were actually in some ways lucky because we locked down very early in the period itself. Now, you also have to realize that the next thing is, unlike other types of elder abuse, financial abuse, next slide please, is one big area, occurs with the knowledge sometimes and consent of the elder victim. In this sense, the elder victim actually gives a consent for you to withdraw the money for them. But instead of withdrawing 300 ringgit, somebody goes and withdraws 500 ringgit but gives 300 ringgit to the elder person. A very common issue, very common problem that happens. And it's very difficult for them to, because their bank balance is not checked into or looked into it itself. So at the old age, the opportunity to earn a living it's hard, you know, because at the age of 60 is retirement in this country. In some, institutions we're lucky because in academia, many of us go on until we drop dead. Basically, that's what happens, you know. But now, even in Malaysia, they're stopping the academic people. By the age of 70, everybody has to cease working itself with all the years of experience itself. So it's a fact. You can't run from it that this is happening to us itself. Now, it is easy to ascertain the loss of assets. You know, it's very hard to calculate, to tell the old person you've lost all this because there's no health insurance coverage in this country for someone above 60. You know, you have to pay for your own treatment itself unless you go to a government hospital. Very easy. It is always very easy to say someone is non-compliant elderly person because the person doesn't come to a hospital. But because of financial issues, the person is unable to come to a hospital because he's unable to take a taxi or find a carer to bring him. And obviously because he or she is trying to save the money. And so because of that, health becomes an issue and a problem as well. So as such, you find that number of negative impacts happens in one's life, you know. And a lot of recent studies have shown what the disclosure is. And as such, you find the abuse that takes place and negative impacts takes place, pathological fear of the crime. You know, that is one thing that happens. And the old people becomes emotionally unbalanced. They lose of trust of others itself, you know, and they lose of trust on their own family members because, you know, they realize what's happening to themselves and this takes place. Loss of confidence in their own financial ability of themselves, it takes place. Easy to sometimes to withdraw someone from their own finance that they have accumulated all these years of hard work, and all it needs is one day somebody comes and swipes up all their fundings and money. So it's so very important that this aspect is looked at. Common also sometimes in nursing homes, but it's very commonly happens in the own home ground itself. Isolation from family members happens, and because of this, depression takes place. The COVID-19 is a very good example how old people were left alone in their homes without being able to being visited by the older generation. Now, if you look at the studies that have been done, obviously the victims prefer to suffer in silence and maintain the secrecy about their plight. They realize what has happened, but they feel embarrassed to bring it out that their own children have done this to them, or own family members. And the financial abuse is very fast growing and is one of the high rapid things that takes place itself. You know, you find that land and a number of policies. We have a lot of policies in this country, in Malaysia, for older persons, and we have got fantastic laws being in place. But having laws and practicing those laws and making sure things run is two separate things. And I think that is one thing that you know, we have been very, very much strongly advocating. It's timely to look at some of the issues and challenges being faced by the older persons itself. And obviously, we need a law for elder abuse itself. Now, we have a number of laws available, the employment law, we have the Employment Social Security, we have Pension Act, we have the Employees Provident Fund, which very often, you know, the next of kin, if someone is old, they can, at the time of demise or death of somebody, the money goes to the next of kin and that sort of thing. And we've got the Minimum Retirement Age Act. So we have got a number of old things. As this slide, you may see our Prime Minister is 94 years old, health and fit, and is still practicing and still being critical of the world as well. So you can see how sharp he is. Now, are there enough adequate laws? And that's one of the things that we have to ask ourselves. And maybe we as clinicians, gerontologists, and social workers, and you name it, all those people are working, really have to look at whether some of these laws are actually being practiced, because it's easy for us to be critical of some of the services that are being rendered by government. I mean, I'm just a critical of everybody else, but There are a number of reasons that, because you've got to realize there's so many issues that are coming up. And the most important thing is to make sure the elderly is healthy when they age. And I think that's the most important. They can be healthy and be fit and be able to look after themselves, looking at their ADL scores fit, then that helps tremendously itself. So if you're looking at, to end myself, if you're looking at the labor laws in the neighboring countries, in Philippines, where they've got a fantastic law for Senior Citizens Act, you know. There's a Maintenance Act of Parents Act in Thailand, you know, the Act of Older Persons in Vietnam. So it's interesting, developing countries. Vietnam, the Act came out in 2003, you know, and that's incredible, you know. I mean, if you go to Vietnam, you realize, you know, the health is more important, you know, looking at primary care is more important than secondary care. But they have already formed that act, you know, and you look at the various laws of the elderly. I mean, to give, I mean, I'm glad Madam just now had, Vice Chancellor had spoken about it. And I think one of the things that we have noticed is cases where single elderly women living alone are very vulnerable to be financially abused. Where I would like to just quote a scenario of a case of an elderly lady living alone, very well-off lady who wanted to sell her house, and she had gone to the church to tell somebody that she's thinking of selling her house. And within a short period of time, a lawyer, the banker, the real estate agent had managed to forge a signature to sell her house. And she was not aware what was happening until her son-in-law came back from Australia. Luckily, I mean, he was a Malaysian, came back for a holiday, and he spoke to me and he realized what was happening to his mother-in-law. So there are a lot of, this is what I like to end to say, unspoken and hidden issues in terms of financial abuse. And I'd like to thank Ganga and Ilungan and the team for having invited me to talk to you all today. I'm sorry about the slides, but I think you all could have a look at it and understand what I was talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nathan. There is nothing for you to say sorry about the slides because we were all seeing the slide very well.
Thank you.
I'm feeling sorry that you couldn't see what we were seeing here.
Not worry, I've got it. I've now got a copy of it, so it's all right.
I am so thankful to you for giving a lot of instances. I think that's something that's very important for us to know. And you mentioned very particularly that it is not an issue of India or Asia, elder abuse, it's across the world. I think there is no country which is free of this menace. And I'm happy that you highlighted that point. The second point I thought it was very good is government policy, legislations and implementation. This is another major issue that all of us face in most of the countries. Policies are there, legislations are there, implementation gets into a lot of study. I think we always think that India is different. You always think Malaysia is different, but this is very common all around. And also citing 3-4 countries like Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. I think they're all fabulous things to compare for us to study. And I'm very sure we'll invite you to speak on different forums with those country representatives being with us. I think we would like to learn collectively, taking advantage. What is a COVID given us is a beautiful opportunity to interact like this. I think all of us are finding some time to learn. Otherwise, we never had an opportunity to interact like this. We were only meeting in conferences. That is something fantastic. I think we are not likely to have a question and session because we are always almost about 25 minutes back behind. So we are not at the question and answers now. I'm inviting Dr. Mala Kapoor Shankardas. I don't think I really need to introduce Dr. Mala Kapoor because in India, when you talk about elder abuse, along with Dr. Jamuna, Mala Kapoor is one person who comes in. There's another gentleman in Bombay who's not in part of this conference, but she is an important person who has been bringing out a lot of issues, both to the government and also various forums. And I'm likely to have her, I request you to, Mala take over. She's from Maitri College from Delhi. She has produced volumes of books on aging on different subjects, and she's a voracious writer in media. I think she keeps, forwarding that, and even she doesn't forward, at least I keep reading them. Nice to have Dr. Mala join us. Thank you, Mala. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Madam, switch on the microphone.
Switch on the mic. Switch on the mic. Mala, switch on the mic, please.
Yeah, can you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for this. So I'll just begin by saying that I'm very pleased to be at this very important seminar, and especially on a day when it is being observed in many countries, the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and we need to talk about elder abuse issues, get together to solutions to prevent it, to combat it. And this forum is going to be one of the places where we can put our thoughts together. So I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. As you are aware, and as it has been said, it's a subject very close to my heart. I've been working on this for last many years, researching on this, writing on this, and also doing certain community programs to raise awareness, doing advocacy for us to stop elder abuse, and so forth. Now, I just want to give a context to my presentation, which is based on global and national trends, challenges, and responses to elder abuse. Is my PPT being shown? Hello?
Yeah, it will be shown. It will be shown.
Please start off with that. So I'm going to be talking on global and national trends, challenges and responses to elder abuse. I'm giving overall a picture of this. The first slide, please. So giving a context to my presentation, I would like to say that elder abuse is predicted to increase as many countries are experiencing rapidly aging populations. And as has been said by previous speakers, it's something which is not just happening in any one country, but happening in many countries, whether they are developed or developing, and whether they are even having filial piety. And that also we find that families are becoming a source or a place where abuse is taking place. So it is an important social, public, and health and legal problem. We cannot deal with it at one level. We need to have a multidisciplinary approach to it. Very important to remember that it is a hidden problem. Not people come forward to report it, talk about it. As it has also been said, people are embarrassed. They want to hide the fact that they are being abused, as it happens with a lot of victims who in fact shy away from discussing the thing which is happening to them. But a international statistics provided by WHO indicates that only 1 in 24 cases get reported. Now, this may vary from country to country, but this is what it is being said. So unless we make it more visible, have more people talk about it, we won't be able to find solutions for it. Next slide, please. So prevalence rates are underestimated, and we need many more rigorous studies so that we can talk about what kind of rates are there, what kind of incidences are happening, and get more statistics on this important subject. As per the 2017 study, which is being reported by WHO, and it involved 28 countries from different regions of the world, different forms of elder abuse were seen to occur. And also based on other reviews and analysis on self-reporting by older people, it seems that the rate of abuse as per statistics available were more in institutions. Now, my personal feeling is that this happens more in the Western countries where more people, older people are living in institutions, but in the Asian context, we found that in the community settings, elder abuse occurrence is more. And when I say community settings, it means more at the family level. Next slide, please. So reflecting on global trends, we find that as per the WHO study, 1 in 6 people over 60 and older experience some form of abuse, which could be physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, financial, and material abuse, or even abandonment, neglect, as well as serious loss of dignity and respect. Now, 1 in 6 disturbing figure, and this can rise as populations age. And so we have to really now get together. It's 2020 and we better do something, because all projections are saying by 2025 and 2050, it's going to be a phenomenal aging population in all over the world. So we need to do something to stop elder abuse. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the situation in India, it is grim. Although there is no government survey, but certain organizations have done some study on elder abuse. And there is a HelpAge India, as you are all aware, has been doing studies on older people since last few years. And one of their recent studies in 2018, which was specifically on elder abuse, provides or reflects on the gravity of the problem. Similarly, UNFPA study has also pointed to the increases in elder abuse cases, although that study did not specifically deal with the elder abuse issues, but it covered various situational aspects of older people. But there is data on elder abuse which we can reflect upon. And based on HelpAge study, it is seen that 60% of elderly report abuse. And again, it's a very high figure for a country which talks about family unity, joint family living, extended family living. How disturbing it is to see that our seniors, our elders are being abused at the family level. There is little gender variation seen in terms of being a victim, but among the perpetrators, more of sons have been identified by the HelpAge study, followed by daughter-in-laws, then daughters and grandchildren. Reporting of abuse is low, and consequently taking measures to deal with it are difficult. So we need societal measures are needed to combat the problem. Next slide, please. This brings us to some of the challenges, because it is now a recognized problem, a pervasive problem, a growing problem, and we need to do something to combat it. We have to give attention to healthcare systems which can detect it, which can manage it, to social welfare agencies which can provide various kinds of services to the victims and help the situation, legislative bodies which can protect and secure older people, and policymakers with the good policies in support of older people, and of course the general public who must speak about this and stop it and bring about shame on people who are the perpetrators. The challenge is, of course, to prevent this happening. And we need to do something in terms of prevention. But before that, we must detect it, manage it, and raise awareness on it. Next slide, please. So the question arises, how do we respond to the problem? Sadly, there is no scientifically rigorous interventional research on elder abuse in any country, though in developed world, this is now taking place, and some of the European countries, Canada, Australia, are coming out with some very nice interventional research, which becomes very promising. And we in India need to look at some of these measures. But looking at some of the strategies which are available in the world for prevention, one is the caregiver interventions, because caregiving, elder abuse occurring in the house, occurring in institutions where caregivers are responsible. If we have some interventional programs at that level, things can be prevented. Money management programs, we just heard of financial abuse. That is a big problem with older people, that they get exploited and a lot of financial and economic abuse happens. So if they can safeguard themselves, things can help. And helplines, those are very important means of helping older people who are facing problems and who need to get some recourse to things. Then, of course, emergency shelters. If some person is abused, where does that person go? So we can have emergency shelters, and also we need multidisciplinary teams to combat it. Now, there is consensus among the international experts that elder mistreatment prevention programs should be made more effective and evidence-based. That's where a lot of research is going on now, is to look at what kind of prevention or preventive strategy helps. Let's identify some of the risk factors, and that can help us to look at the solutions and also look at the ways in which we can stop it. Now, the core issues in terms of the risk factors begins with the individual. If an individual is poor in physical and mental health, then the chances of him or her getting abused are more. If the individual is economically dependent, has a low social status, then the risk is higher. Looking at the living situation, if there is greater dependency, it increases the risk. Joint living increases the risk, and lack of social support is also a risk factor. When there is nobody to inquire about a person's health, a person's well-being, people who are the perpetrators get encouraged to find a lonely older person or an isolated older person as to make him or her the victim of elder abuse. Prevailing ageism, legislations not supporting elderly, migration of children, lack of social security and practices are all social cultural factors which increase the risk of abuse in any setting. Now, clearly, we need multiple responses to address some of these issues. Prevention is one aspect by raising awareness, detecting abuse, strengthening intergenerational bonding. We can prevent elder abuse. Then the other action plans can be to adopt combating strategies, have standards of care. That is something we must focus on, because what is quality care? We don't really get down to defining it or use it as a way to provide care. We need to provide support to caregivers, have more respite care to lessen their burden so that they are not pressed to abuse the older person. We need certain mitigation strategies, provide community support, legal reforms for recognizing rights of the elderly, etc. And some of the interventions can be in terms of mechanisms for reporting, because we know people don't come out to report. And we need to have provisions for the victims, like I mentioned earlier, shelter homes, counseling centers, all these can help. And of course, the caregiver needs to have a lot of support so that they understand what caring for an older person means and how they should go about it. Clearly, in this kind of response, we need an interdisciplinary approach, which is the need of the hour. And from the social sector, we must have certain welfare measures, including of financial support, because economic dependency is one major factor for or risk for abuse. We must have more protective services, pensions, and social security support system. We must encourage community participation. There should be adequate housing facilities so that that reduces the abuse incidents. There should be more intergenerational educational opportunities. In terms of legal mechanisms, we must have legislations in place. As you are all aware, we have the maintenance bill, which is doing some good, but it needs to be amended, and it is under the process of it. Then we should have enforcement provisions. It's very good that some of the senior citizen cells and police stations are taking rounds of places, are registering senior citizens and keeping a watch on them, and that works as a deterrent for abuse against them. And other supportive measures for life and dignity of the elderly are needed. And besides that, we need the health sector response, which is provision for minimum and basic services. We need specialized care, geriatric care, which helps to detect, identify abuse, and provide certain kinds of help when it is there. So detection and management of abuse is very important, and regulation of care standards is a very important thing. And finally, I would like to say that we need much more research in this field. We need evidence-based research on elder abuse. We need to understand the magnitude, forms, and nature, clarity of definition, concept, and perspective on what are we saying is elder abuse? How do we define it? Collecting evidence on interventions, what works, what are short-term strategies, what are longitudinal impacts, and then sharing of preventive strategies and responses across cultural manifestos, bringing it in their agenda that elder abuse issue is a thing to confront. It's only when there is a political will in the country that things can improve. So thank you very much for your patient listening. And I thank Dr. Gangadharan especially and Professor Ilango and other members of the department for giving me this opportunity to share my views and bring focus on a topic which is not only important to all of you, but it's a passion with me to talk of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mala, for a wonderful overall picture that you gave on this important and a menace. And I think very nice, both Dr. Jamuna and you insisted upon what is called a multidisciplinary care teams that would really address this. That's an important aspect. The second thing that you are talking about is a preventive aspect, and also talking about individual responsibility in front of the families. I think studies all over have mentioned primarily the perpetrators are families. I think a lot of education needs to go there. And we are talking about intergenerational relationships has a lot of impact on minimizing the impact of elder abuse or even having that. I think the political manifestos and political parties getting into that is an important aspect. I think there are some countries which have been very sensitive, like, I think Canadian Prime Minister is a good example who always talks about, we lost really a lot of senior citizens in this, epidemic. I'm very happy that you brought this up. Now I'm bringing in, we would like to have, thank you so much, Dr. Mala, once again. And now we are having, I'm sure, Fimada Shamam, must be going through little pressure because of her timing. She has another interview to attend to in the radio. I'm so sorry if I caused you a lot of anxiety. I mean, you can quickly make the presentation anytime. Feel free to leave. And welcome, Shamada, once again for having accepted our invitation to be among us. And we hope that you join us in more program to come. Thank you. Puka.
Good. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I'm going to. Do I have permission to actually present my presentation? Window. Good morning, everyone. I'm just trying to see.
Milton, can you put up the slides? Yeah. Dr. Shamam, are you able to see your slide? Yeah. Dr. Shamam, cannot hear you. Dr. Shamam, are you there? She will join. I think probably some connectivity issues.
Yes, sir.
I hope she comes in, Dr. Ilango, because there seems some confusion. We
Yes,
are not able to hear her.
yeah.
We are not able to hear her.
I'm trying to.
I'm also trying to send her a message, and
Okay,
there seems
sir.
to, but she's showing the picture, but she's not able to talk, I think.
Yeah. No, actually, the
wait.
presentation is being coordinated by Milton, sir.
I know
Milton
that. I
is
know that.
showing the slide.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sir. Probably she has lost the connectivity.
I hope she reconnects. Hold on. We'll wait for a minute.
Sure.
She has
sir,
joined.
Hello.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen? I'm going to share
we
my
can see. Yeah.
Okay,
Go
perfect.
ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'm Famida Shamam. I'm from South Africa. I am the CEO of a local nonprofit organization called the Association for the Aged. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. And I must say I'm honored to be in the presence of such esteemed people in the field of aging. Okay, just quickly to South Africa. South Africa has a population of just under 59 million, and about 9% are people over the age of 60, which is about 5.3 million. Life expectancy at birth for 2019 was estimated at 61.5 years for males and 67.7 for females. You'll see that this is slightly down from the presentation that Professor Nathan had done in terms of his country, where I think it was 76 and 77 respectively. This is just indicating how our life expectancy has increased over the years, and part of the reason why we had such a low life expectancy was due to the HIV/AIDS pandemic that had affected South Africa quite severely. As we're talking about elder abuse, I think it's important to understand what are the legal instruments that we use in South Africa to protect older persons. So from a global perspective, we have the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Older Persons, but South Africa was also a signatory to the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging. And South Africa, subsequent to the Madrid conference, had devised the South African Plan of Action on Aging, which included all 3 priority directions that's included in MIPA. However, at that time in South Africa, elder abuse was highlighted as a big issue. So we included a 4th priority direction into our policy on aging, and that priority direction had to do with the protection of older people. What subsequently happened was that the South African Plan of Action on Aging was translated into the Older Persons Act. So we have a specific act that's designed to protect older persons, and it is a rights-based act. So it talks about the rights of older people to protection and care. In addition, the South African Constitution has an entire chapter on the rights of all citizens. Chapter 2 is the Bill of Rights, and all citizens, including older persons, are entitled to those rights as per the Constitution. Okay. In our Older Persons Act, we have a specific chapter, Chapter 5, that is dedicated to the protection of older persons by ensuring that their rights are not violated. In terms of a definition of abuse, we used some of the international trends in terms of definition, and basically it's defined as any conduct or lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there's an expectation of trust which causes harm or distress or is likely to cause harm or distress to an older person. So it seems like it's quite a wide definition of abuse, and it includes quite a few different components. I think the one important thing is that abuse has to occur within a trust relationship, and it can be something that people do or something that they don't do. And that can be confusing initially when we were looking at the definition. And the issue around conduct that people are not engaging in is around not, for example, giving people access to their medication. Those kinds of things are included in the definition. The Act speaks about different types of abuse. So it says it includes physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological, and economic abuse. And in most of the cases, we find that there is a combination of different types of abuse in the matters that we deal with. In terms of elder abuse in South Africa, we had a national toll-free service, and some research was done around the calls that were received over a 2-year period. There were 3,402 calls that were received, and the biggest category of abuse was physical abuse. They also found that 2/3 of the incidents were abuse that was occurring in private homes, so not necessarily in residential care facilities, and more than 50% of the callers were the victims themselves. This has implication from a intervention point of view, obviously the having a national toll-free service was seen as a useful service for older people and as a mechanism for protection of their rights. In South Africa, the definition may be viewed as too narrow because it doesn't account for the loss of respect for the elders, as well as systemic abuse. And in South Africa, we have the issue around allegations of witchcraft. And very often it's the older Black women that may be presenting with dementia that are labeled as witches. And so they are subject to abuse, and in many cases, they are subject to economic abuse where their assets are taken away from them. So in some cases, they have found that where there are allegations of witchcraft, it has resulted in the death of older people. Another worrying issue is that there's very violent forms of abuse, in particular, the rape of older women, and this occurs by family members, and increasingly we're finding that grandchildren are the perpetrators of abuse. Of late, we've also noted that where there are violent crimes against older people, it is resulting in the death of the older people. So the crimes against older people are becoming more violent. Okay. Another factor that impacts on older people in South Africa is the issue around HIV/AIDS. South Africa has the highest number of infected people in the world. In 2017, there were 7.06 million who were HIV positive, and that's approximately 12.6% of the population. Most at risk were Black female, and this changes the roles of older women as the economically active people in the country are infected by HIV/AIDS and present with all of the complications. The older women are expected to become second-generation parents, especially where people have died from HIV/AIDS. We're also finding that thanks to effective HIV treatment, the number of older adults living with HIV is increasing. And obviously this has implications for South Africa and how we respond to care needs. The current challenges that we have in our country, while we do have the instruments for people to report elder abuse is mandatory. The process is too cumbersome, and very often people then bypass the reporting of the abuse and choose not to. The Older Persons Act makes provision for a register of criminals to be set up. However, 10 years after the implementation of the Older Persons Act, it is still not up and running. There's lack of enforcement mechanisms. So there are various role players that need to be, and stakeholders that are responsible for a variety of different things in terms of responding to elder abuse. This includes the Department of Health, the Department of Justice, the Department of Social Development, and very often the different departments don't speak to each other and are not clear about their roles. As a result, they are not able to enforce the provisions of the Act. Most older people don't live in residential facilities, and I think this is important to understand. The state, so the South African government supports just under 32,000 older people in care facilities, and a further 107,000 through community-based services. The rest are expected to fend for themselves. So of your 5.3 million older people, we have just under 139,000 people who are subsidized for some state services. The rest have to be able to provide for themselves. Another mitigating issue is the issue around unemployment in South Africa. Our unemployment rate in the last quarter of 2019 was 29.1. It's projected that it'll go up to 35% with the effects of the coronavirus. There are issues around the breakdown of family structures, and we see this across the world, issues around the loss of respect, beliefs in witchcraft, the high crime rate increases the risk of abuse as well. Just in terms of yesterday, okay, I'll come back to COVID-19, so maybe come back to that point. In terms of COVID-19, so I said, I'll present elder abuse within the context of what's happening with the coronavirus. This basically is a timeline of the first 100 days of COVID-19 in South Africa. I think what's significant is that our first COVID-19 patient arrived back in South Africa on the 3rd of March. And as we go through the timeline, our national lockdown was implemented on the 27th. And incidentally, on that day, we had our first COVID-19 death. Our hard lockdown was extended until the end of April. And on the 1st of May, we went into lockdown level 4. We are currently still in lockdown. On the 1st of June, we went into lockdown level 3. What this means for older persons is that our residential facilities are still prohibited from having any visitors. There is restrictions of movement. However, there has been some opening up of our economy so that people can go to work and earn a living. As of yesterday, these are COVID-19 stats. You'll see that the total number of positive cases is 70,000. 1,480 people have died, and our country has conducted just over 1.1 million tests to be able to firstly case find and secondly respond to people who are presenting with symptoms. Incidentally, yesterday was the highest number of new cases. You'll see 4,302 new cases in a 24-hour period. Understanding our South African curve, you'll see that we are still moving up the curve. We haven't turned the curve as yet, and we anticipate it will continue over a period of time. What I'm particularly interested in is the age distribution of the deaths. And in particular, you'll note that in the age group 60 to 99, there were 54.2% of the deaths amongst the older persons. So it seems to our South Africa to tie in with what's happening around the world, and that has implications for access to services for older people within the context of abuse and the violation of the rights of older people. In terms of our COVID-19 and what we have done, we increased our social protection amount. So all South African older persons are entitled to a grant, an old age grant, and it is a means-tested grant. Our social protection is accessed by 70% of the older persons, so 3.7 million people are accessing the social grant. In terms of COVID-19, the grant amount was increased from $110 to about $118 for 4 months, thus giving older people access to a little bit more money. In addition, there's been some directives from the state for facilities that run old age homes, and these are the 4 things that they had provided in terms of directives for older persons. The impact of COVID-19 on the rights of older persons, firstly, in terms of access to health. 80% of the older people in South Africa are dependent on the public health system. We already have a stretched public health system, so with COVID-19, it makes it more difficult for older people to access the normal chronic medication. In addition, there's marginalization for COVID-19 services. Just as an example, in one of the facilities that we run, there was a suspected positive case in our building. Yesterday, we sent them to the public health facility for testing, and we anticipated that they would keep the person there until they have the positive results. But unfortunately, they send them back to the building where we have 600 other older people. So it does become problematic to try and quarantine off people when you have so many older people in one setting. The impact of HIV/AIDS on older persons also impacts on their health. In South Africa in particular, we have 2.5 million who are HIV positive but who are not on ARVs. In addition, we have 1.5 million who are over the age of 50 and 500,000 who have low CD4 counts. So just from these figures, you understand the implications then in terms of trying to access health and their inability to access that health services can be deemed to be abuse because we are not giving them access to the services that they require. The second is with regards to access to income. The lockdown, obviously, everybody was prevented from moving out of their home. 13.8 million people live below the poverty line in South Africa. And with the lockdown regulations, many people who have been working in the informal markets were unable to earn a living. As a result, it's placed enormous pressure on the old age grant. So in many cases, the old age grant became the only household income. And again, that becomes fertile ground for abuse, especially financial abuse. The issue around access to housing is a big issue as well. We have 2,700 informal settlements with about 6.8 million people. Potentially, there's a large population of older people within these informal settlements, and it makes it very difficult for older people to social isolate within the context of overcrowded situations. Then the right to protection in terms of the Older Persons Act. The Older Persons Act says that people are entitled to protection if there are two things that happen. And firstly, they deem older persons to be in need of care and protection. I've just indicated what are some of the different aspects in the Act, but in particular, point G talks to older people who live in or are exposed to circumstances which may harm that older person physically or mentally. And certainly within the context of COVID-19, living in overcrowded conditions will harm the older person because there's a likelihood that there will be community transmission and older people will be impacted on that as well. Further risks that we are having to deal with, 33% of the urban populations live in overcrowded slums. Older persons who are caregivers can't social distance. So that has implications as well. And finally, I think the nature of township culture is that the communities are based on togetherness and kinship. So having the expectation around social distancing is unrealistic within this context. In addition, there is the sharing of resources. For example, you will find one community tap, which all community people are using, as is in the picture. You'll see a whole number of people are congregated around the one tap. So social distancing in that context is very difficult. In summary, elder abuse continues to rise unreported and unchecked in our country. COVID-19 increases the risk for abuse. Protection of public health is equally as important as social distancing and hand hygiene. And this is particularly important within the context of 80% of the population of older persons accessing public health services. There has been a focus on hospital readiness for the impact of COVID-19 and not on residential facilities preparedness. This fundamentally will deny older people access to healthcare should they become infected. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Femida. I hope just a minute. Hello. I'm so sorry about my, I'm also
going through the trouble of the power fluctuations. Thank you, Femida, for wonderfully presenting the policy and what is happening in South Africa. Are you getting too much? Hello? 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 Are you able to hear me?
No, it's okay, sir. No, it's okay.
Yes, sir. Now you are audible, sir. No problem.
Okay. No, what happened? There's a lot of fluctuation in Hyderabad for the past 4 hours of time, so I'm struggling with that. I'm shifting computers to see that I'm keeping track of what's happening. So thanks a lot, Femida, for your wonderful talk. I think for me, a couple of takeaway for this group would be Number one, are you able to continue to hear me?
Yes.
No? No? No?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can
Okay.
proceed, sir. Yeah.
I will. Okay. The first point is the rights-based, policies and programs in South Africa, which is well known. Sorry? Which is well known in the world for your efforts on rights-based approach. I think we have seen you in, we see South Africa talking in several forums in the globe about the rights-based. The second point is, unfortunately, the witchcraft has been a big talk around the world on what really happens in South Africa, as much as abuse that happens in India. And interesting aspect of HIV, I wish I had time to share with you some of the experiences I've had hearing about HIV when I was visiting the African countries, particularly South Africa to begin with. And as far as the COVID is concerned, the situation that you're talking about, having limited movement for the senior elderly from the homes, and also visitors being permitted, absolutely being banned, is a situation in India too as the same. So we have a lot of things in common. And social distancing, I think when you are talking about South Africa not able to have a social distancing, imagine India with a population of practically 4 billion, what will be really happening to us? Thanks once again for coming in, and I hope you are able to stay as long as you can. And we look forward to the next speaker. Now the question is, Ajay, between Ajay and Shekhar, I think Ajay said he has to leave not later than 1:15. So I would request now Shekhar to get in. Dr. Shekhar. Dr. Shekhar is a very experienced, professor in population studies, and he has done a lot of work on aging. I have known him very closely since I was associated with the building knowledge base on population aging in the UNFPA India project. And is also very actively involved in research on LASI project, that is longitudinal study in India with international collaboration. He has a lot of experience to share. And I'm very sure next 15 minutes time, he will keep all of us enthralled with his presentation. Thank you, Dr. Shekhar. Come along.
Am I audible, Doctor?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gangadharan and Professor Ilango for organizing this international webinar on Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And good afternoon to all of you. I think we had two interesting presentations on India by Professor Jamuna and Dr. Mala Kapoor Shankar Das on the situation with regard to the elder abuse, neglect, and violence against the elderly. They have provided you with a lot of information and experiences based on their many decades of research in this field. Today is to highlight some of the issues with regard to elder abuse and elderly welfare in the context of the COVID-19 and the pandemic and the scenario what we are in now. You know that we are facing a health emergency now. COVID-19 is an unprecedented health crisis all over the world, and it is almost well documented that elderly are the most vulnerable segment for infection as well as fatality. Evidences from Europe, evidences from all over the world, both developed and developing countries, clearly shows that the higher risk compared to any other age groups. Now, naturally, one may ask a question, why elderly are more vulnerable? Now, there are many scientific reasons for that. One is that weaker immunity among the elderly. With advancing age, the immunity level going down. The presence of comorbidities. Many of the elderly also have types of comorbidity and chronic diseases. So that makes them very difficult for them to address this issue. And so the recovery will be much, much slower. And we should also keep in mind, with advancing age, the disability also increases. So large number of India's elderly are disabled and they need caregiver and assistance. So we are looking at the COVID scenario and the lockdown scenario in India, which is one of the longest period anywhere in the world. And what is happening to these 140 million elderly in India, approximately in 2020, it is around 140 million. Now, their data earlier indicated that the World Health Organization says that 1 out of 6 elderly experience some form of abuse or neglect. And the studies in India is already discussed well, quoted various figures from 10 to 15 expressed by the media, academicians, and even in the international organizations about the violence against women, and particularly the domestic violence happening during that period. And in fact, in the National Commission on Women in India, talked about it, the number of increasing cases of domestic violence reported and all of the things. There were a lot of discussions and action. But unfortunately, there were very little discussion about the elder abuse happening in India during this COVID-19 scenario, and particularly during the 2-3 months of intensive lockdown. Now, if you go by the Western evidence, it shows that there was a 10-fold increase in elder abuse during this period of particularly during the period of COVID, particularly citing the experiences from the United States and other countries. We don't have much data on India, but if we go by some of the reports and indications, we can very confidently say that the elder abuse is on increase, particularly those happening within the households as well as in the old age homes. So I would like to highlight 2 or 3 issues related to this elder abuse and neglect and lack of health care for the elderly during the period of COVID-19 and also in the period of lockdown. Now, one important aspect of the prevention for against the virus infection is the social distancing, or what we can call the physical distancing of the people. Now, in fact, it is one of the protocols to protect the spread of the coronavirus and break the chain of the infection. But in fact, what is happening when you look at the elderly scenario in India, the social distancing has led to some kind of a social isolation for them, because they would like to meet their people, they want to interact with their friends, neighbors, distant relatives, and they were inside the home and they are not able to meet anyone. So it was because they were in the higher risk of infection and mortality, they were also having increased anxiety and depression. And that was one. So their isolation from their friends, neighbors, and loved ones created more problems. And this isolation led to more loneliness. And the news reports about the elderly are more susceptible to this disease, the number of cases going up, the deaths, all this created more panic reaction among the elderly. So there are considerable research evidence from the West which shows that whenever there is a social disconnect, there is a greater risk for anxiety and depression among the elderly. So in fact, the elderly are trapped within their own household, many times with their abusers. And this is a more difficult situation. They are not able to communicate with anybody else. Similar way, their own friends or colleagues or relatives are not able to visit them as well. So this is a very difficult situation for elderly. So in fact, I may say that lockdown in Indian scenario has resulted in some form of a breakdown of social relationships for the elderly, and it has increased the elder abuse and neglect to a great extent. Now, there are another segment of elderly, those elderly living in old age homes or in the elder care homes. Now, as most of you know, that large number of old age homes are not having the proper amenities and facilities, managed by small organizations with limited funds and very limited infrastructure available. They are overcrowded. And in fact, the evidences from West shows that, particularly in the United States, Italy, major fatality during COVID-19 happened in the long-term care homes, and because of the lack of the healthcare staff, overcrowding, and the medical infrastructure is not able to cope with all that. So the important point here is that most of the old age homes, the family members are not able to visit because there were restrictions on the visit. Lack of caregivers, many caregivers are reluctant to provide care because They are absent because they are also human beings. They are afraid of infection, scared of infection. And imagine a situation in an old age home where one or two residents, inmates getting infected for the COVID-19, and what will happen to the remaining inmates, where they can go. So in fact, considering the higher susceptibility of this particular group, our priority place for COVID testing should be in the old age homes or the elder care homes. And there were a lot of financial stress and lack of financial stress in managing the old age homes, poor amenities, and all this has increased a lot of vulnerability on the elderly living in the old age homes. So I was talking about the elderly living at home, the elderly in the old age homes. Now coming to the third part of it, third issue which I would like to highlight is the access to hospitals and treatment. Now we know the long duration of the lockdown resulted in a big disruption of the regular healthcare services, regular treatment, because large number of elderly are undergoing treatment, and caregiving mechanism. I think one of the impressive or the news which emerged in the early days of the lockdown in India is the story of the two old couples from Kerala, Mr. Thomas, who is 93-year-old, and his wife Mariamma, who is 88-year-old, who were infected with COVID-19, and because their son came back from Italy and they were infected and they were tested positive and they were hospitalized, they were treated in a government hospital. And interestingly, both of them, despite their comorbidities conditions, their advanced age of 93 and 88, they could come out successfully, and they went back home fully recovering from the disease. That was, many medical experts consider it as one of the rarest of rare incidents. But we know that not many elderly who were infected, who were tested positive, are not that fortunate like Thomas and Mariamma. So many of them were unable to meet their doctors. Their regular appointments were cancelled. They were not able to travel to the hospitals. They were not able to get the support of others to take them to hospital. Their regular health checkups were delayed. And interestingly, we should also keep in mind that large number of elderly, particularly poor among them, have no health insurance or health support programs. So according to the survey by the IAPS, the study on global aging and adult health, what we call it a SAGE survey sponsored by World Health Organization, 52% of the elderly in India had at least one restriction with regard to activities of daily living, like their ability to take care of themselves with regard to eating, bathing, toileting, dressing, and getting out of bed. And 40% of the elderly had two or more restrictions or limitations with regard to activities of daily living. So that restricts their movement, actions, and dependency on others to a big level. And good number of the disabled elderly are also using many assistive devices like prosthetics, hearing aids, wheelchairs, and many other things. So there were reports that they were not able to repair these the aids, the prosthetics, and other things. They were not able to purchase. They were not able to visit the specialized hospital for their treatment. Now, during one of the economic measures announced by the government of India during this pandemic scenario was the providing the elderly's pension, old age pension, and the pension for the disabled and widows for 3 months in advance. Though the amounts vary from state to state, some 300 rupees to 2,500 rupees, depending upon the state to state. So it is a small, meager amount, but it's a great support for the elderly. But there was one online survey carried out among the disabled. It's found that nearly 40% of them were supposed to receive this pension during the lockdown period. They were not able to receive. So there were problems with the implementation level, banking levels, and large number of the elderly located in the rural areas and from the poor strata of society have a lot of difficulty. So all this, what I am talking to you about based on the overall scenario, the newspaper reports, and what we can assume how the scenario. We don't have a concrete data about the issues related to elder abuse or violence, the sufferings, and all other things. But we need solid data to provide, to study about this, to understand the elderly scenario. So we need to have a solid database to continuously monitor health and well-being of elderly. So I would like to take 2 more minutes to highlight one important study carried out by our institute now, International Institute for Population Sciences. That is a longitudinal aging study in India, LASI study. It is in collaboration with the Harvard School of Public Health and University of Southern California. It is a longitudinal study to trace and track the elderly for the next 25 years, every 2 years visiting the same households, interviewing them, including the health biomarkers and health measurements, and trying to find out the social, economic, and health conditions of elderly, the changes. So we have just completed the LASI Wave 1, which covered around 73,000 individuals of 45 plus. Out of that, 32,000 are elderly, 60 plus, and among them, 7,000 are 75 plus, 75 years and elderly. So this is a segment, and this is India's first, and in terms of sample size and coverage, this is the world's largest longitudinal study. Interestingly, it is also synchronized with the similar studies across the world, like the health and retirement study in the United States, English aging study, the European aging study, Chinese longitudinal aging study, Japanese, Korean, Indonesian aging studies. So this data, wealth of information and data coming from this longitudinal aging study will provide not only a lot of scope for policy making and program implementation, but also for research, for multi-country research and cross-cultural analysis. We have just completed the first wave of this survey of 73,000 individuals out of that 32,000 elderly in 2019. We have almost completed preparing the report, and we hope to release the data and the report within next 1 or 2 months for the public use. And I'm sure many of you are interested in aging studies, including the elder abuse and neglect. You will find this data very useful, based on a survey throughout India covering all the states and union territories. And I would also like to add that COVID-19 has created a new scenario with regard to elder care and elder welfare. And the next wave of LASI, which we are going to do the survey in the next year, 2021, going back to the same households and same elderly individuals to find out the changes, we will also incorporate the changes and the problems and the difficulties that they faced during the lockdown, during the COVID-19, the infections and all things. So we are sure we are going to have a wealth of information emerging out of this longitudinal aging study. I think I have already taken the time. So let me conclude by saying that in Indian tradition and Indian culture, we value our elders, we respect our elders. Let us join hands to protect them from this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shekhar. Absolutely fabulous. I think every one of you has made, enriching experience. I'm sure every listener is enjoying every presentation that every one of you made. Nice to know, particularly your references to LASI. I think many of us are anxiously looking forward to the report of the first wave whenever they are going to be published. The second thing that I'm very happy that you covered the subject in 3 phases, namely what happens in the families, institutions, and in terms of access to healthcare. I must tell you, old age homes funded by the government of India, which are about maybe around 400 and odd, we are all actually we are in touch with all of them. Everyone, no old age homes allowing any visitors to come. They're not even letting the regular doctors come home. I think that is a condition under which they're all very well operating. I think the old people are not even allowed to go. They do express some challenges because when old people fall sick, they don't know what to do, where to take them. That's one big challenge that they have. But nevertheless, let me tell you, they're all managing them extremely well. Now, with the time being so limited, I'm sorry that the program is likely to be extended by at least 15 minutes time. Dr. Mangaleshwaran, Dr. Ilango, and team, I hope you're all ready for that.
Yes, sir. No problem, sir. Go
Okay,
ahead.
now
Sir.
I invite now our good friend, Dr. Ajay Bailey. I think very interesting to have Dr. Bailey, who, again, an Indian who's working in Netherlands, who's done both Indian studies and outside India studies. I'm sure he's going to bring in a lot of impact of what is happening. And probably is one study where one presentation which could probably include some insights into what is happening in India, in addition to his experience, particularly in Netherlands and perhaps any other country. Dr. Ajay is a very interesting person. I look forward to listening to you, Dr. Ajay. Welcome. It's over to you. Thank you.
Can you all see my slides? Is that visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'll move my own slides. Hopefully that will work. Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Gangadharan and Professor Ilango. It was very interesting to listen to many people whose work I've read, but at the same time it was nice to see them on screen and hear their wonderful words. So my presentation today will focus on the impact of abuse and neglect on older adults in India. So I have, much of the research that I'm presenting now is based on projects that we've been conducting since 2011 in various states, but also together with different Indian institutes. And these are some of my team members who are also participating and whose work is also incorporated into this corpus of elements that we are developing in relation to aging. The research projects that we have had so far mostly focus on qualitative data, focusing on lived experiences of older adults. We also increasingly use visual methods to understand people, older adults, and their experiences. But we've also interviewed caregivers, both in home and institutional settings. So when we come to the first part in terms of abuse and neglect in home settings, what we've observed in many of our projects is verbal abuse and emotional distancing is one of the core elements which creates or increases stress and anxiety among older adults. This verbal abuse could be from family members, but also neighbors, other people within the community with whom they interact or they are forced to interact, or who live around them. This creates this level of stress and anxiety also to access the public space. Older women live in more precarious living situation compared to men because of less access to inheritance, to economic means, but they also have to depend on men in the family. Often the spouse, or on the death of the spouse, the elder son or the son-in-law with whom they are staying. Economic abuse and lack of access to inheritance pushes older adults further into poverty. And for those groups, in terms of middle class or higher middle class group, they have their own mechanisms, like what Professor was talking from the Malaysian case. He talked about financial abuse. But if you think about poorer households or low socioeconomic groups, for them, any kind of economic abuse pushes them further back into poverty. And this is something that leads to desolation, people being abandoned on streets. I mean, many of you all have worked on it, have read on these issues. You all know what happens in regards to abandonment, especially of older adults, when families are not able to take care of them, of the older adults, or due to these abuse conditions are left behind at different places. We've seen examples of bus stands, temples being left at care homes or at hospitals even, where they had to arrange for other care mechanisms for the older adults. When we talk about abuse or neglect, a lot of imagery that comes with it is about physical violence. But more than physical violence, it's also everyday microaggressions that takes place in terms of small things that affect older adults, be it respect, be it access to food, or being taken away rights to have a say into the matter, no role in decision making. All these are smaller elements, but over a longer period of time have a greater impact on the mental health of the older adults. So every day, this accumulation of aggressions has an impact not only on daily life, but also long-term impact on mental health. What we have observed in studies that we have done in Kerala, Goa, and Karnataka as well, is that migration of children, be it to other cities or abroad, loss of spouse, and also loss of fellow older adults who, especially in the case of women, is that when their own social circle, many people pass away, that they have very less safety net available which they can access. This makes them also more vulnerable to abuse and theft, and they don't feel safe staying within their own homes. When I think about institutional settings, it's also about lack of guidelines on monitoring of care institutions, which leads to spaces of abuse and neglect. Of course, when you compare this to the Western situation, especially in the Netherlands, for example, you cannot start a care home without having all required rules and regulations set into space and monitoring taking place. However, even within all of those rules and regulations, there's still abuse that takes place. So in the Indian context, especially among the care homes that we have studied, we found that lack of monitoring, lack of guidelines on who is supposed to provide care and what the behavior of the caregivers can also be potential spaces for abuse and neglect that older adults experience, more so in non-profit or welfare-based care homes. Within for-profit care homes, we see they have better safeguards. There's much more scope for accessing help in case of abuse, in case of neglect that is there, because it's also that they pay for these services, then they have more rights to ask for care as well. Ageism and ageist remarks, especially if you look at institutions more from not just as care homes, but in a broader context, ageism and ageist remarks in hospitals, clinics, and banks increase insecurity for older adults. They feel that every time, this is also an example of a microaggression in terms of abuse that they would face, or being neglected or not called upon in the bank, or being asked to wait for a longer period of time, or being used certain terms that are ageist in terminologies, showing disrespect. This increases insecurity among older adults, because with every experience of this thing, they are less likely to go out to seek care. What we've also seen is that older adults have to constantly adapt behaviors when power relations are skewed, in terms of be it hospitals or banks or other places. They have to constantly think, how should I behave in front of this person so that I can get the required care. They sometimes have to underplay themselves, or they have to, change the way they talk, change the way they behave, or take someone along with them. All these adds extra stress on the older adults. In the third part, I would like to look at the fear and abuse and threats in public spaces. So we talk about disabilities in this project that we have on inclusive cities through equitable access to urban mobility. We're focusing in India on 3 cities, Delhi, Bangalore, Delhi, Bangalore, and Kolkata. And in Bangladesh, we're looking at Dhaka. What we see here is that there's a lot of focus on physical disabilities and then access based on this Accessible India campaign, for example. But in addition to physical or what disabilities you can see, there's also a lot of invisible disabilities in terms of lower insights in terms of they have sight problems. They have slight problems to walk. The footpaths are not easily aligned, for example. There's a gap between, take a very simple example. When they have to get off from the bus and the distance between the bus's step and that of the footpath, that is already a risk for a fall. And many older adults actually fall due to these kind of problems of managing transfer between different transport options. When you look about transport, you may think, oh, everybody has access to transport, but it's not the case. Increasing barriers to transport delay seeking healthcare for older adults, because with every experience that has been negative and not so positive or threatening, if they've had a fall, for example, they will delay seeking healthcare. With every delay in seeking healthcare leads to higher morbidity, or they have to wait for someone to take them to the hospital. So all these acts increase barriers in accessing care, in accessing financial issues, accessing social support. The other thing that plays a bigger role, especially in the Indian context, what we've seen in our studies is the walkability in cities. Not just cities, but also towns, in terms of encroachment of footpaths, for example, lack of space to imagine you're an older adult with some mobility issue. If you have to walk slowly or you need some space to move around, it's almost not possible, especially in bigger cities when footpaths are not free enough for mobility, or there's a very swift mobility of people saying, but giving not so much space for older adults to move on these footpaths. Walking still among lower income households or older adults in these households, walking is still a major way of, wherever they can, is still a major way of transport or mobility. So that's something we still need to protect within our cities. So it's not just about older adult or age, but the combination of things. So age, gender, income, and disability, all these things combined together create higher inequalities for older adults. And that's something we have to recognize, that it's not just one of these characteristics, but a combination of these that can create abusive or situations of threat for older adults. So when we think about the socio-emotional impact at these multiple levels, if you see at the individual level, it's this loss of dignity, hope that they would change, and trust. So how do you trust someone who's if they're abusive? Do you trust your caregiver to provide you the care? When you look at it from the family context, the loss of attachment, a sense of belonging to the particular group, and this constant stress or anxiety of unsafe environments, of abuse, of physical abuse, but also verbal and emotional abuse. And at a broader level in the community, many people do not report these issues, or there are not enough social networks available for reporting of these issues. So loss of ties, loss of support within the community as well. And within public spaces, we see why older adults would be less able to access public spaces is this fear of fall, fear of not able to manage. Cities are also not increasingly age-friendly in terms of the planning, in terms of how they are laid out, how transport is organized, for example. And I don't want to only say that, okay, older adults are victims of this whole process, but older adults also have an agency. Older adults also take action. But it is the context in which they live that we have to have a focus on. So there is a need to take a more of an intersectional lens to examine these inequalities. So not just focusing on age or gender, but looking at these combination of age, gender, income, and bodily ability. These things together can create different levels of inequalities that older adults face. Older adults have the agency to bring about change and leave oppressive environments, and we have seen this in our studies, especially in the case of Kerala, where we have done, Nikhil, one of our researchers, has done study among old age homes, especially from the government-run old age homes, that many women have left, older women have left oppressive environments to bring, change their lives, to seek the safe spaces. So there is agency. It's not just we have to look at older adults as victims of that. Okay. What we also need to take into account is the need of community support and empowerment to oppose and report abuse, which is essential. It's not just about the older adult reporting abuse, but also the community that surrounds them. Especially in bigger cities, what we see is that there needs to be more of these neighborhood communities to increase social capital and create these safety nets. These large apartment complexes, or the way in which residential arrangements have changed over a period of time has meant that many of these earlier ties with neighbors, with fellow community members or religious group and thing has become, the bonds have become much more weaker. And this leads to lack of safety nets into access help when cases of abuse can be seen. So we need much more awareness so on what support is available, what counseling can be provided, especially within this community setting. Towards the end, what I would like to say is I want to use this term by Thomas Harf, who is a very well-known gerontologist. He talks about the pandemic of aging. And there was this very interesting discussion that was there on this whole COVID-19 thing and how ageism actually is a bigger pandemic, because more than the virus, it is this disregard to the rights of older adults that is harmful. What we see in the Western context now, but also emerging in other areas, that media and social discourse around aging and their needs further stigmatizes older people. Just say that they are, we have to sacrifice the older adults, we have to take care of the young. All these kind of terminologies that the media uses further stigmatizes older groups. So what I would also like to stress is that older adults are quite diverse. It's not just one particular group. Poverty, lack of social support, expensive medical care further increase risks of COVID-related morbidity. It's not age, but context, access to resources, and comorbidities that increase older adult mortality in relation to COVID. That was most of my presentation. If you would like to follow our projects, this is some ways by which you can reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you are hearing me. I'm just worried about my. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ajay. Absolutely fabulous. It was down to earth. Extremely good that you could bring in a lot of lives, what you have really done. Examples, particularly what you call them as inclusive cities. Very interesting to know that you are coming from Netherlands to do this job, and probably your team is doing this job. I think all of us will really look forward to the outcomes of such reports. Because I think when you're talking about the grassroots level, all of us talking about the policies and programs are only blaming the government or the others for it. I think if you are talking about the community taking responsibilities, particularly talking about the local level communities, I think that could really make a lot of difference than blaming it on everyone else. Very interesting. I wish we had longer time to really interact and then exchange. But with all that already time going far behind our scheduled time, I would really like to thank you. And I'm sure there is not going to be opportunity for us to think. But I want to tell you, we would like you to come back to us for a very specific subject, because you are making very interesting observations. We would like to learn from you. And particularly, we would like you to get involved in the Center for Gerontology in our university that we are doing together. I'm looking forward to some of you putting in some efforts. And in case there is an opportunity for you to give us a project to work in Tamil Nadu, I'm sure Dr. Ilango and Dr. Mangaleshwaran will be very happy to join with you. I can assure you quality. Thank you once again, Dr. Ajay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Now I'm coming to Dr. Our friend Teddy Andrews, who's a good friend of Dr. Ajay and all other members here. Teddy has been a very interesting young person. And he was a little hesitant. Should I do? Should I do? I'm not going to be. I'm very busy. I said, don't worry about being busy. Just step in. And we want some young people also to get into this field and look at the future of aging altogether differently. I'm very happy to present Dr. Teddy. I know I'm using the word Dr. Teddy. I know that he will be doctor very soon. And wish you all the very best for your presentation, Teddy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Of course, indeed, it's a great pleasure to be on this platform. Yeah, I'm trying to put on the screen. Yeah, is my screen available for everybody?
It's just loading.
Yeah. Okay. So probably yes, I would start. So of course, it's a great pleasure to be joining this international webinar, and of course, I congratulate the organizing team, the social work department at Bharat University for organizing such an event, and also I'm really taken up by the dynamism that the department shows. The 7th webinar amidst this lockdown, and so many things are happening around, but still they feel like they need to do their part to the society to overcome these crises. So I thank and I appreciate the organizing team, and very especially my sincere thanks to Dr. Gangadharan and Dr. Ilango, who are actually my role model, my star, my gurus and my mentors in this area of aging. And thank you, sirs, for inviting me to share my thoughts on this webinar platform. I really feel privileged to be part of this panel because I've referred to a lot of the papers of people who have already spoken before me, and of course I'm really humbled and I feel so privileged that I could share this panel or be a panelist as part of this webinar. And also I congratulate the Bharat University and the Heritage Medical Center for jointly launching the Center for Gerontology and coming up with this diploma course. Definitely that's the need of the hour. I really appreciate. And, I, of course, once again, congratulate the partners in doing it. So coming to my topic. So I was wondering, what are the things that I can share? And then I felt that, yes, probably the kind of inspirations or the observations that I got from my PhD work, I can link it to this, to observe this Elder Abuse Day. So my title would be Missing Link in Understanding Elder Abuse or Elder Care, because earlier in Dr. Jamuna, she mentioned that elder care and elder abuse is intertwined. So I would like to kind of take a bigger position of not just elder abuse, but elder care. What is the missing link? And that I would like to share from more like an intergenerational care relationship perspective, which of course is a lot of my research is based on that. So as I said, I draw observations from my research experience, also from my personal experiences in the last couple of years. So what has been researched in the elder care over a period of time? So it is, of course, when we look at literature, the earlier, probably 20, 25 years back, the traditional joint family system ensured care, security, safety of older adults, which actually gave a very rosy picture of, am I audible?
You are audible, Teddy, but the thing is your presentation is not seen. Yeah, can you share it, your presentation? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can it be seen there?
Do you want me to do it?
No.
Yeah.
No. You have Milton. You have his presentation.
Yes, sir. I'll present it, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
Teddy,
thank you very much.
Okay. Then okay, you proceed. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yes.
You can remove, Teddy. You can remove your presentation. You can stop presenting, so that Milton will join for presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you move to the second slide? Yeah. So the traditional literature actually paints a very rosy picture about, what are the benefits or advantages of traditional joint family system, which ensured care, security, safety of the older adults. And then later on, of course, when the kind of living arrangements started changing, and studies started focusing more on, the negative impacts of the negative impacts on the elder care, which is of course brought in by globalization and all other socio-demographic transitions. And then, of course, in this process, what has happened is older adults are seen as care receivers, but whereas in Indian context, a lot of care and support extended by older adults still happened. But however, the importance for such exchange of care and support from the older adult side were given less importance. And then we further reviewed, and then we found that yes, there were a lot of other studies which talks about elder care more from a from a perspective of physical health conditions and mental health conditions, and then what sort of burden experienced by caregivers. So all these were the kind of broader inferences. But actually, from that, what happened, what we kind of got out was most of the literature focuses elderly care as a more like a problem, or problematize the aging process and elderly care. But however, we of course, we don't want to take that assumption when we moved into the, to do a study. So what are the different questions that emerge as we kind of reviewed these literature? Is the change in living arrangement always negatively impacts elders' well-being and care? May not be. And then the second question was, how do the older adults perceive the care and support they extend to their relatives, both in joint and nuclear households? Because, as I said earlier, it was very much undermined, which was not talked about. And of course, yes, here we thought, okay, we need to look at the positive dynamics. It's not always that, the change in living arrangements, is kind of bad for elders' care. It's not that. It's also that, we need to look at the positive dynamics, because if we want to come up with policies and programs, it is important that, this is the severity or the nature of the issues in terms of elder care. But however, what are the recommendations you are making? So I would like to kind of put across my thoughts based, more from the preventive and promotive aspects of elder care and preventing elder abuse. After gaining this realization, what we did was we approached the intergenerational exchange of care and support more from a neutral position. Yeah, we did realize, yes, looking the issues in the elder care from a problem perspective is important. At the same time, we also need to look what are the positive dynamics, what is the positive relational exchanges that takes place in the families, not only in the traditional families, but also across different living arrangements. Can you please move to the next slide? Yes. So then, of course, when we tried to look at this, then we were able to capture the positive dynamics as well as the negative dynamics in the intergenerational care relationship. And also, say, for example, here I would like to point out, even, the whole, the idea of observing the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I think we've been kind of observing this since 2006. But however, I'm not very happy with the kind of word or the terminology used, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Okay, if you really read that word more carefully, it just says elder abuse awareness. Okay, so do we kind of try and do more and more research understanding the intensity, the severity, the nature, and the different types of abuses that are taking place? And then we talk about it. However, I think, we also need to start doing, efforts or coming up with strategies at the national level, global level, and at the local level to kind of prevent and reduce the elder abuses. So that's something that, I would like to put across to this platform, that probably, why don't we, of course, I don't know whether we can do it, but at this, point of time, I would like to highlight that why don't we make it more like a, World Elder Care Day or International Day of Prevention of Elder Abuse, which sounds more complete. So though, of course, I do realize that, yes, putting something very negative receives more attraction, but many times what happens is, particularly in research, it kind of leads us into, trying to look into the negative aspects and then try to kind of probably exaggerate, interpret in a more biased fashion. And then we miss out on all these positive dynamics that actually happens, which is actually very important when we design programs and policies. However, yeah, so with that understanding, we kind of approach this from a neutral perspective, and we conducted a multi-stakeholder qualitative study in South India. So here are some of the few insights that we kind of derived from this study. So of course, I would like to highlight some of the positive dynamics, and then I would probably explain a bit later, what actually emotional, psychological adaptations and processes that older adults and their children generation they experienced, and how actually it definitely brought down the chances of elder abuse. So one of the important insight that we got is, of course, it's not the care that the older adults receive, but also the care and support they offer to the younger ones in many ways. So I've given a couple of the quotes given by my participants, those who are older adults and the young adult participants. So of course, there are plenty of exchanges that takes place. Economic exchanges, economic support exchanges, and then emotional support exchanges, and and of course, supporting in domestic chores, household chores, and there are plenty of very many ways, and formal and informal kind of exchanges. There are plenty of exchange of care and support that takes place. The next slide, please. And probably, yes, we might be thinking that, yes, the consulting older adults in the family decisions was a kind of an outdated practice, but no, still it is happening in many, many families in India. And we can, I've given a couple of quotations given by my participants. Still, probably, of course, we have done close to 130 in-depth interviews, out of which, I would say close to 60 to 70% of the older adults continue to provide the consult or provide advice to the family members in making very crucial decisions. It could be related to marriage, it could be related to buying a property or a house, and also probably it could be even dealing with stress, dealing with emotional difficulties. So older adults, because of their experience and knowledge, they continue to provide such advices, such counseling to the younger relatives. Can I have the next slide, please? And also, one of the important dynamic which the older adults appreciated is the visible efforts made by their kin to stay connected with them on a regular basis. Of course, now kind of change in the living arrangement is definitely inevitable. It will happen, because of various changes. But however, amidst these changes, the efforts the kin or the relatives made to be in touch with them, that the older adults find it so appreciative of it. And they felt that, yes, because of that emotional bonding that we share, they continue to be in touch with us. And whenever they come us, some of them, they said, they hold my hand and then they go for a walk along the street. And then some of them said, their relatives actually kind of canceled their holiday and they came down to Chennai, for example, to see the older relative who is sick. So like that, there are so many efforts made by the kin that is also appreciated, because they appreciate more now. The reason is because the kind of work culture that the present adult generation is changing. It's very busy, it's very complex. So amidst that, the efforts that they make is found to be more advantageous and more helpful for the older adults. Next slide, please. And then fourthly, of course, again, this is also from the older adults participants, predominantly it came from. So the spiritual engagements that the older adults and the relatives, they participate jointly, they found that, yes, that builds the emotional bonding in them by walking along to whatever the temples or mosques or churches, and also to kind of engage in regular prayers and pujas, and all these things actually kind of helps them to feel that they are part of the family. Next slide, please. Yeah, so how do these, of course, I've just taken around 4 broader kind of insights. And what happens? So these experiences, the older it gave the sense of belongingness, feeling loved, instrumental, productive, and satisfied for older adults. And also because, the reason is, as I said earlier, amidst this very busy and complex world and work culture, the kind of, efforts made by the kin, that kind of gives them a sense of that I still belong to my son, I still belong to my relatives. So that sort of feeling that they get. And also in these processes, it's not just with older adults only, but also with, their children generation. So both these generations need to they've been going through a lot of these psychological and emotional adaptations according to the circumstances and the context that they live in. So, but of course, we also try to cover, different, diverse populations from lower socioeconomic strata, from higher socioeconomic strata, and also people living in, in old age homes, people living with families, and also people living in the nuclear living arrangement independently. So we try to, and also male, female, rural, urban differences. We try to kind of accommodate all these. So, however, across board, something that we found is, yes, these sort of psychological, emotional adaptations are, kind of being taken up by not only by the older adults, but also by their children generation. And however, of course, these strengthen the intergenerational bonding and care relationship. In other words, of course, these sorts of processes actually kind of minimize or dispel the chances of elder abuse in those families. I feel these are very important kind of, practices or insights that we need to derive when we design policies and programs. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes, and of course, probably you might be wondering, whether it is only the positive dynamics that we studied. No, there were, negative dynamics also. But however, there are a lot of stories, there are a lot of, information available. And but however, of course, some older adults took some time to accept the loss of family relationship due to abuse and neglect, and some people, of course, continue to, grieve the loss. And but however, some people kind of use their spiritual experiences to overcome the losses that they experienced in their relationship, and also they were able to recreate an alternative social network with non-kin. And of course, my interviews with with the participants of Heritage Medical Center in Hyderabad, and also a few NGOs in Hyderabad as well as in Chennai and in Madurai. So what we came across was the social structures created by these NGOs and religious groups offered opportunity to develop this extended network. So basically this compensates for the loss of their social relationship with their family to some extent. Of course, it cannot definitely replace the family relationship, but to some extent, to kind of get that sense of belongingness, to get that sense of, yes, I'm being loved, I'm being cared by somebody to some extent. So that kind of, processes are taking place because of these social structures that are created by these NGOs. Can the next slide, please? All right, to conclude, yes, I would recommend that, yes, approaching concerns around elder care, not only from the problem perspective, but also more from a neutral perspective, so that we do not miss out on the positive intergenerational care dynamics that are taking place in the families. And also, yes, it is very important that, we should also try and take inferences or insights into what can be done with these. Yeah, definitely we need to understand the severity, the burden of the elder abuse and the nature, the types, everything. But at the same time, it is also important that, yes, what sort of recommendations or what sort of, strategies, what sort of, efforts we need to make in order to kind of build the familial or, intergenerational bonding and care. So with that, I would like to put across a few suggestions in terms of way forward, more on a preventive and promotive perspective. So I think, viewing older adults as an integral part of Indian families is very important, because we still, there are in a lot of families, they do, engage in decision-making processes. They do, take part in providing care and support. They do, provide a sense of security for younger children or probably the adult children. Yeah, so even somebody was talking about the counseling services. So when there is a family counseling happening, definitely we need to ensure that, because if there are some older relatives in the family, they need to be considered as part of the family. So that, and also the counseling should be kind of happening around that. And also, it is very important that we need to support the families in meeting the care needs of older adults. Of course, there are a few pointers in the policies, but however, in reality, still a long way to go. And also, creating more and more social structures for older adults to engage in intergenerational activities within the family and in the community. Yes, it's also very important. So with these thoughts, I would like to close by saying stay safe and healthy. And please do take care of elders in your family and in your neighborhood and among your relatives. And so thank you very much once again for Gangadharan sir and Ilango sir for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. And of course, I really learned from other talks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie. You did a great job. Absolutely wonderful. Nice that you did a study on intergenerational relationships. I think very much Bharathidasan University, Dr. Mangaleshwaran, Rajavel, and the entire team, including Dr. Nirmala and others, have been part of our programs on developing intergenerational programs in the Trichy area.
Yeah.
I think on an average, we do every year 40 schools and colleges in Telangana and Tamil Nadu, developing the intergenerational programs. So you can be rest assured, if you are going to do further study, you can really do this kind of studies, what impact it has, though the students might keep going. And I can tell you, being a grandfather myself, I think last night my granddaughter sat with me because today is their webinar, the school webinar, 3rd standard. We are talking about similarities and dissimilarities between grandfather and the grandchild. So it was very interesting. Last night we had a long discussion on that. I can tell you, this really strengthens. I think it is something phenomenal. In 1994, when I started Heritage Medical Center, nobody knew what was intergenerational relationship. Nobody knew what was grandparenting. But I think 25 years later, we are realizing it's become a big issue. Every school is conducting, every parent, there's no school which is not conducting. If they are not conducting, something is really wrong on our part, not communicating with them. I'm very happy that you really spoke on a subject of a great importance in the future. I would like to tell all the participants here, one apology from our end, particularly from my end. We had probably 7 speakers, which is probably a large number, but we did it deliberately for only one reason. It's an important day, an abuse prevention day. We thought we should have different perspectives. We are very sorry that we have delayed it by almost 40 minutes time. Next time we will ensure that we don't have any program beyond 1.5 hours time and not more than 3 or 4 speakers. Really apologize to you for the delay, but let me tell you, the learning has been phenomenal. I enjoyed every talk. I don't think, as most of you studying in colleges or being MPhil students or professors or teachers, I think I can tell you we have a lot to do. Dr. Ilango rightly said that they are setting up a course for diploma, and I'm very sure it's going to be very useful to the community. Thank you. Here I'm handing over to Dr. Mangaleshwaran with a big thanks to the entire team, your team, for making a grand show. Thank you very much.
So thank you, sir. Thank you, all the speakers. So we had a plethora of information right from the eminent scholars, starting from Dr. Jamuna, the Vice Chancellor of Sri Mahila University, and as Dr. Gangadharan mentioned, so we had almost 3 hours, right? The session was almost 3 hours. I think that I don't want to take much of your time because you know that as per the Indians time, we are nearing lunch. So let me hand over the session for a formal vote of thanks to Dr. Rajavel, the Deputy Coordinator.
Just before that, one word, just one quick word.
Yeah.
Dr. Gangadharan, thank you so much for moderating the session wonderfully and connecting all the perspectives of the speakers. And I should really tell the participants and all my colleagues who are viewing this program that we have really observed the day, International Day for Prevention of Elder Abuse. Why I am saying is it's not just for formality. We have truly observed the day. We have spent a lot of time deliberating on various issues and getting into a lot of, getting an idea about the different forms of elder abuse. I think we have had a 360-degree perspective of elder abuse today. So thank you very much, all the speakers, right from Professor Jamna, Dr. Mala Kapoor, and others. I would like to, I think my colleague Dr. Rajvel will make the formal vote of thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Mangal.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. It gives me immense pleasure to propose vote of thanks to the international webinar, Observance of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, Elder Abuse Trends, Challenges, and Ways Forward. I take this opportunity to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor P. Manishankar, and Professor Gopinath Kanabadi, Registrar of Bharathasan University, rendering the wonderful support for the academic activities. I am grateful to express my gratitude on behalf of Bharathasan University, Department of Social Work, and Bharathasan University Heritage Center for Gerontology, to Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Jamuna Devavaru, Sri Padmavati Mahila Vishwavityalayam, Women's University, Tirupati, wonderfully delivered about elder abuse, facts and figures, and her research experience reflected her address the issues. We express our gratefulness to Professor Nathan Vaityanathan, Dean, School of Occupational Therapy, Pradana University, Malaysia. His 47 years experience in health aging, he delivered the financial abuse and special loss of elder in this his living country. Permit me to mention our appreciation to Dr. Mala Kapoor Sankardas, Asia Representative, International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse, New Delhi, in her topic, Global and National Trends, Challenges and Responses to Elder Abuse. I bow my head in gratitude to Ms. Pemida Shamam, CEO, TAPTA, Durban, South Africa. Her topic is Elder Abuse, the South African perspective in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. She wonderfully delivered her lecture. We offer our sincere thanks to Dr. T.V. Shaker, Professor, Department of Population Policies and Programs, Mumbai, India. In his topic, Elder Abuse during the COVID-19 pandemic in the Indian perspective, with the relevant references and reports. We're happy to mention our obligation to Dr. Ajay Bailey, Professor, Chair, Social Urban Transition, International Development Studies, Faculty of Geoscience, University of Utrecht, the Netherlands. His topic on the impact of neglect or violence on older adults in home and institutional setting and community responsibilities. I'm happy to declare thankfulness to Mr. Teddy Andrews, Assistant Professor, Social Work Program, Prana School of Public Health, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Manipal, Karnataka, in his topic dynamics and impact of relationship and international care relationship. Words may not be capable of to communicating our sense of gratitude to Dr. Gankadharan, Chairman, Heritage Foundation, Hyderabad, President of International Federation of Aging. He motivated in high time to conduct the international webinar on special day, that observance of the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Good colleagues are those who know good colleagues are those who know that we is more powerful than me. Richly deserves our gratitude and grateful to Professor P. Ilango, Department of Social Work, Syndicate member of Bharathasan University, and coordinator of BDU Heritage Center for Gerontology, wonderfully organized the international webinar on this topic. I express my gratefulness to Dr. R. Mangaleshwar, Professor and Head, Department of Social Work, Bharathasan University, for his unconditional support and cooperation. Permit me to mention my appreciation to my colleagues, Dr. J. Bojarida, Nanjan Eljo, Dr. D. Nirmala, Assistant Professor of our department. I'm happy to declare thankfulness to webinar cornerstones of our department, Dr. S. Sureshkumar, Dr. R. Karthikeyan, Dr. R. Selvamani. I extend to Mr. John Milton, PhD Research Scholar, and Mr. Leone and Mr. Pugal Chodi. Finally, thanks to all of you for being with us this day. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so